Hi friends, this is the Be Real Babe podcast, a place where your average Canadian wolfpack come together to talk about life stresses, messes, and successes. A safe space where being yourself is the ultimate goal. Each week we will bring you new episodes sharing our opinions on a ton of different topics in hopes we can get a better understanding of ourselves, each other, and this crazy world we live in. We want to build a community where we can show up as ourselves, be real, and lay it all out there. By sharing our opinions and experiences, we hope to reach others who can relate so we can all help each other learn, grow, and heal. But please keep in mind, as a disclaimer, none of us here are professionals. No one is giving any advice. We are strictly speaking of our life experiences, our opinions, and for entertainment purposes only. Now, with that being said, it's time. So grab your drink, grab your joint, and let's jump right in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Be Real Babe podcast. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for stopping by the show today. We hope that you have a good time. And if you're a returning listener, watcher, supporter, thank you guys so much from the bottom of our hearts for coming back time and time again. For those that don't know me, my name is Brandy. I am the host of the show. And today, you guys, we're on episode 163, Being Real with the Open Minds podcast. You guys, another absolute electric conversation between two podcasters, two Canadian podcasters. This was so much fun. I cannot get over how much fun this episode was with Christopher. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Just honest talk about podcasting, the world, having opinions, all that fun stuff. And it's not going to be the last time that we're going to see each other on our shows because that was just so much fun. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you, if you are listening to us on Rumble or YouTube on the video platforms, like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and if you can, comment for engagement. Help us out of those algorithms that block us and censor us in good old Canada. And if you're listening on the audio like Spotify and Apple, you can also follow us and give us a little review if you're feeling gracious. It is the holiday season. If you want to bless your bays with a Christmas present, your presents would be nice, but since we can't have that, or maybe you want that, come on the show. But if not, a nice 5-star review. I've asked Santa for a few, so if y'all could deliver on that, that'd be dope. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at the Be Real Babe podcast. Make sure you're liking, following, and let us know how you're feeling. Shoot us a message. I love hearing from you guys. It means so much to me, especially as we're ending this crazy year, almost ending this season in next month in January, taking a break and coming back for season 7. I got a big ass surprise for you guys in season 7. Wait to share. But yeah, let's get on to this fire episode, you guys.
I did the same.
So stupid. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, babes, it's time to get on to the show. And with me today in studio, I have a very special guest joining me from all the way on the other side of our beautiful country. He is the host of the Open Minds podcast. I'd like to welcome Christopher to the show. Hey, Christopher, how are you?
Hey, Brandy, I'm great. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. I've been so excited. I was meaning to have you on a long time ago, and like time doesn't exist. And then it just disappeared. And then you popped up again. And I was like, okay, this is my moment. He's right in my peripherals. I'm going to ask now. And I'm so glad that you decided to jump on. It's a good way to end 2023 for us. So I'm pumped.
Yeah.
This will be our Christmas present to our listeners when this airs. So
Amazing.
thank you. But before we get on to your journey and we can chat about podcasting, can you give our community a little bit of information about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Christopher Balkaran. I'm the host of the Open Minds podcast based out of Toronto here. Started it actually just over 5 years ago, hit my 5-year mark a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Congratulations.
And it's been just a wild journey ever since. And I just can't wait to see what the future has in store.
And that's amazing. So 5 years, are you kind of like, when you think about it, you think that's such a long time, but in my mind, like we're on season 6 going on season 7, we do 2 a year, but so it's almost, we're going on 3 years. And I think like parts of me, that's so much time. And then, but it's also like, I feel like I'm just getting started. Is that kind of how you feel as well?
Yeah, I feel like I'm literally just hitting my stride, and it actually took 5 years to get here. It's almost like a full like high school plus like OAC, which used to exist here in Ontario, for me to finally be like, oh, I finally get like
this.
intro to algebra, you know?
Yeah. Totally get
So,
that feeling too. Sometimes I'm
yeah.
like, oh, I just want to quit. And then other times I'm like, I feel like I'm such a baby though. And that I have so much more to learn. And just in all of
100%.
it, like as a human being, as an editor, as a content creator, as just a human,
Yes.
an energy exchange. Like I don't want to stop connecting with people. That's my favorite part about podcasting. So
Yes.
let's start at the beginning. 5 years ago, why did you start your show? Like, was it just like, I'm doing this, or this is something you dreamed of like forever?
You know, I was at a time in my life where I was just so angry at things. I was angry at my work. I felt I was working hard and not being appreciated. I would turn on the news and I would see just such surface level coverage of really important conversations
Yeah,
and an unwillingness to delve into the gray and the deep area. And then I'd go
uncomfortable.
to podcasting, correct. And then I'd go to podcasting and it would just be conservative podcasts or liberal podcasts or socialist podcasts or like libertarian podcasts. It was all these different podcasts with their political spin. And I thought to myself, why is there no space where we can talk to each other, and with experts, not for profit organizations, um, and just people about the issues that are affecting them? And I was just, I realized that the the anger that I had at the time was there was this gap in my existence where I had these questions and there was no vehicle that I found to ask them.
Yeah, fair.
And I was like scared of asking them because of the very politically correct culture that we live in and still live
Yes,
in.
yes.
So I said, I'm
Eggshells
going to show
everywhere.
them. Right. I thought I'm going to show them. I'm going to start my
Yeah,
own podcast,
yeah,
and that's
totally.
really how it started. Yeah,
That's amazing. And I see about a year ago, you rebranded. Is that correct?
just about. Yeah, so it
Just
was
about, yeah.
initially called Strong and Free, and
Cool.
I understand it had very like right leaning
Hmm.
a phraseology with that, and I didn't want
Okay.
to, I really
Political.
wanted people, right? I wanted people of all walks to come in and be like, wow, that was an engaging conversation, and I learned something
Yes.
from it, and this person isn't right,
One side.
left. I don't
Yeah.
know where this person is, but
Mhm.
I'm able to take something from it.
Yeah, and that's so true. And we've always kind of, because people can't sometimes differentiate that, right? It's like sometimes they get
Yeah.
so drawn to that political, oh well, that person's right or that person's left, therefore their opinion doesn't matter. And it kind of,
Yeah.
it does a disservice to everybody, because then you're not
Mhm.
listening to, and then you're building yourself an echo chamber. So good on you for being like,
Right.
I just don't want to make sure that I have an audience of just one side or the other, that I want everywhere, so that I, as a podcaster, as an individual, can grow, and not just have one side. And I think all of us have gone all over the place in the last couple of years, trying to figure everything out. And sometimes some people don't have grace for for anybody when you're just trying to very publicly share that journey of your growth, right? Like something that I said in season 1, I probably maybe don't align with now in season 6, because I shouldn't. But that's 2.5 years ago, right? But
Mhm.
sometimes people struggle with that one a little bit. So that's, and then what was the idea for the rebrand? Were you just feeling like, you said that's the name itself, and then you just wanted to have more all around topics, or did the topics change, or just the name itself?
Interestingly enough, the topic stayed the same, but Strong and Free didn't capture what I thought I'm trying to bring to the podcasting universe, which is a truly open-minded conversation. And, I think with both the right and the left, you can see it, both but up to their levels of uncomfortableness.
Mhm.
Um, whether it's the left on diversity, we can chat about this more, but diversity in hiring. Well, where does diversity begin and end, and what do we classify as diverse? I mean, that's a real question. I think the left has
Mhm.
to struggle with.
Yes, fair.
And then the right now, what's going on
Mhm.
in the Middle East, I think most people would say there's blame on both sides,
Mhm.
but this kind of binary examination of the issue of blind support for Israel, I think, is something that many conservatives right now are currently wrestling with. We saw that with, I think,
Mhm.
the Daily Wire and Candace Owens
That
openly
was wild.
criticizing,
I
right?
was
And
so
so,
shocked. It's like you're like watching
right.
siblings fight, kind of, in a way. Like, and you don't always have. I love what Candace said on Tucker too, where it's just like, we don't have to
Right.
have the same views. It's just about respect, right? And I'm the same way. Like,
Correct.
I can have completely opposing views of you about something, as long as you're being respectful for to me, and we can have an adult conversation. That's all I care about, because I
Hmm.
respect having different ones, because then I grow, and I'm like, okay, that lip, and if it triggers me, I'm like, okay, girl, why did
Yeah.
that just make you upset? Why did that person's
Yep.
opinion upset you? Like maybe you need to be
Yes.
revisiting why that is. Maybe your belief isn't as strong as you think it is. But instead, right now, we've gotten this bad habit of then projecting that in DMs, in comment sections, you know. And I think that's what triggered me to ask you to come on was kind of, I was like, oh, you should do a mean tweets because you're saying the mean comments. And sometimes like it's funny, but it's not, because it's just like, how
Huh.
do we get into a world where we can say these things? Like, why can't we just agree to disagree without being so vicious? And I think we're the same way with the show. We wanted to, it's not about sides, it's about human experience. So let's just talk about our
Correct.
experiences, and then we
Right.
can all share, and then we can have a more of a better understanding. And I think people get
Yes.
mad when they just don't know, right? And they get concerned. And then you hear people are so busy, they just read
Hmm.
headlines, they don't dive deep, right? And I feel like you
Hmm.
probably notice that when you, especially when you talk about controversial topics, people
Yes.
just read the headlines and then freak out in your comments. And you're like,
Yes.
did
Yes.
you watch the video to the end? Like, did you? Because
Yeah.
you missed the whole thing, right? So,
Right. And
oh,
I think
so
that
frustrating.
100%. But I do think that there is there's some beauty in it, because in a way it's people are reflecting back to me what they're going on social media for, and it is
Totally.
those like quick bites. And so many times I ask myself, Christopher, did you do a good job in that hook to really
Hmm.
explain in as clear words as possible what you're
Yeah.
trying to convey? And sometimes I fall into the trap of making like I'm sure you've seen like a 90-second reel, and you have to literally watch 90 seconds to get to my point, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why did I do that? Like that's the issue. And so when
Yeah.
people come at me in the comments, I'm like, you know what, you have a point. Like this is kind of confusing, right? Like you do have to like give
Have more
them the goods at
context
the
to
end.
that. Yeah, yeah, no,
Right.
I get
So
that. It's, I think that's one of the hardest parts is really trying, like you
yeah.
said, get that point across and advertise for the show when you do only
Yes.
have 90 seconds. And you also lose people now in that
Oh.
I think it was on the whatever podcast, the one guy, the Brian or whatever, is going off on someone and said you had TikTok brain. And I thought, holy
Hmm.
shit, like that is such a good way of saying that, because,
Yeah.
I've even noticed myself, I've been trying to get off of shorter content because I noticed that then that's what my brain craves. And I just like, after 5 minutes, I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm done with this. I'm like, this is terrible. Like, no. And so I go fucking read a book. Like, you need to focus on something for more than 1.5 seconds, But as a
Yeah.
creator trying to get like people to come to your show, it is a lot of
Hmm.
pressure to get that, because you are taking it out of context, quote unquote. And some people just don't get the point at all, or don't
No.
watch to the end, or immediately hear 30 seconds and are like, social justice,
Yeah.
which is fine. Like you said, it
Sure.
opens up dialogue. But I think as like podcasters, we have to very much work inside and being like, okay, like you said, was that the right thing? Did I capture that right?
Hmm.
Am I doing this because I want to help people? Is there ego involved in it? Like, I'm sure you
Hmm.
suffer from imposter syndrome as well from time to
Sure.
time.
Sure. Of course.
And you're like,
Of
why am I
course.
here? And then you got these comments,
Yeah.
you're like, whatever.
I
But
could
what
just
would
hit the
you,
delete button and
yeah,
go
like
away.
done. Like, oh, I can do it. I
It's
can do
over.
it. Yeah. Like, yeah. And I've had
Yep.
those moments, because advocacy is a big part of our show. And I've had
Mm,
moments where people are very in their unhealed moments, and I totally understand that, and
mm,
they're not ready, and they kind of project that onto you, and that's totally understandable. There has been
yeah,
like some hard sides to it, but let's talk positive. What do you find has been
sure.
your biggest win about podcasting?
It's amazing to know how many people have very similar questions and are terrified to ask them. I can't tell you, Brandy, how many people reach out to me regularly. And I mean, this is only recent because I've been floundering in obscurity for, 4 years and,
Yeah.
4.75 years. But,
Your
over the
Matt Rife
past,
stage. You're just
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're shining
Uh,
now.
right. And so people reach out all the time saying, things like, what you said, I can't say to my partner.
Hmm.
The questions you ask, I can't ask my partner, but
Hmm.
I watch your stuff. And so, you get those messages, and what do you do with that? And it's something I've told friends of mine and say, this person's going to bed with this other person, and the person sleeping next to them doesn't even know what they're thinking or
Yeah.
what their thoughts are on
Yes.
whether it's, Justin Trudeau, immigration, climate
Mhm.
change,
Yeah.
abortion, the
Inflation.
list goes on,
Yeah.
inflation, whatever it is. And to me, that's so powerful, but also there's this connection. And so sometimes when people say, oh, Instagram has shadow banned you or YouTube will ban you, and they'll do all types of things, and I'm like, yeah, they might do that. But the questions that I bring up actually still remain. And
Mhm.
that's, you cancel Christopher Balkaran. It's not like Christopher Balkaran's questions go away.
Yeah, exactly.
Those
Yeah.
questions
The
stay. And
tree
it's
still
not
falls in the forest. Like it
exactly.
still happens. Right.
Right, right.
Yeah,
And
totally.
if they cancel me, like I'll just go under Schmistifer Schmalker. Like,
Yeah, no
it's
doubt.
just
Like we're not living for the cancel anymore. I think
yeah,
that's where creators are all people, all voices are saying, you know what? Like if you
yeah,
truly believe in freedom of speech, then you need to stand it whether I agree with you or not, or I absolutely hate what you said and I
yeah.
think you're trash panda. I still believe that you have a right to have that trash panda because I
Yeah,
want to be able to have the freedom of mind. And what I could do is just share how I feel and bring my message out to the world and hope that that inspires you to change that. And if not, then
yeah,
you meet your maker at the end of your journey, whatever
yeah.
that is, and whatever culture, religion, and you believe or whatever, right? It's not for me.
Mhm.
But that
Correct,
is
yeah.
that has taken me a long time to get there, though. That's for sure. There has been,
I'm
like
with
you
you.
said, dark times, right, where it's just
Sure.
like so angry, right? And like I said, there's like that longing to I felt very lost as well. We started this during the pandemic. I felt very
Mhm.
silenced. I felt very lost. I felt very alone. And I felt there was no
Mhm.
connection. And I was like, I just need to get this energy out. I can't go to the gym. I can't, we're in
Mhm.
BC. We were so locked down. And so
Yeah.
it was just a
Yeah.
really nice way to connect to people by talking about just human experience. Because we're like, let's start with something that's not controversial, just so that we can get like
Yeah.
more of a understanding. We wanted a place that people could be like, yeah, we're suffering from anxiety, depression. We
Yeah.
have been hurt by birth control. Like we do
Mhm.
understand these pressures, and we are going through these social journeys and these conspiracy theories,
Mhm.
and we're reading this shit too. Like, we're just as confused.
100%.
And I do agree. It's the
100%.
message from people that are like, hey, this resonated with me. And further to
Yeah.
your point, it's sad that so many people are saying that they can't converse with their spouses about these hot topics. Um,
Mhm.
and it's just really unfortunate because I think there's been so much division that there's no talk about how do we talk about these hard things together? How do we agree
Yeah.
to disagree? How do we be empathetic and compassionate and still maybe don't like the other person's opinion, right? And I'm hoping that shows like
Yeah.
ours can help do that, right? And bridge that. And I think that's what you're doing right now, right? Is asking the
Yeah,
hard
thanks.
questions and like having the balance of answers, right? And showing all sides.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brandy. And to
Mhm.
me, it's the questions are definitely the pinnacle, but to me, it's the every single person wants to be listened to and understood, and it doesn't matter where you are on the spectrum politically, what your opinions are on any number of topics. At the end of the day, people just want to know that their voice is being listened and heard, and I think that's the big challenge. And so when I talk to people about, the Freedom Convoy is the perfect example. I say to them, I say, you're taking, in some cases, a small group of people with a Confederate flag or a Nazi flag or whatever, and you're saying that's the entire movement. It's like, well, how about the 70-year-old woman in Alberta who has a fixed income and can't get the vaccine because of a pre-existing health
Mhm.
condition and
Mhm.
can't visit her family just
Family.
south of Alberta in the United States because of that. Now, don't you think in that scenario that person has a legitimate point to protest the government?
Hmm.
Or
Totally.
what about the trucker with $40,000 a year, can't feed their kids and
Hmm.
can't travel? And yeah, there's like U.S. policies as well, but
Yeah.
don't you think they have a point to raise that with the federal
Within their own
government and
country.
say, right, like, can you use your diplomatic power to
Mm.
work with the US and make some exemptions for us because of the situations that we're in?
Yeah,
Um, and suddenly people's
totally.
guards get down. And
Hmm.
it's like, that's not what's being showcased on our media. That's not what's being showcased in our, YouTube feeds. And that's the
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
where I think even the most diehard Trudeau supporter,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh.
suddenly starts like, okay,
Hmm.
like
Okay,
that's
maybe
that's a
not.
Canadian as well.
Yes, yeah,
Right.
yeah, we're
And
people.
so
And I
when
think that's what
yeah,
the convoy did. It reminded us all that we were people. And if you were on that
right,
side of like, I didn't lose my job, but I definitely
right.
I was very vocal about not being vaccinated, and we got very
Yeah.
much banned on our show on social media. I'm
Wow.
still being penalized for it, which is kind of wild. It's the super hardest part about this whole thing is just like I just wanted to give a voice, like you said, to
Wow.
the people that couldn't do things for
Mhm.
myself. My personal story is that I have infertility from birth control, so I
Mhm.
just wanted to
Wow.
like hold up a second, like I got a real smart chance of being a mother. I just don't really want to
Mhm.
jeopardize that as I'm trying to figure this journey out right now. And then people started saying
Mhm.
really mean things to me. And for people that know me, know my soul, like I'm a friggin' Disney character. Like I am just like a bundle
Mhm.
of happiness and energy. I don't mean ever
Wow.
ill to anybody. So I was like, hey, when you guys are being mean and you're saying that we're Nazis and we're haters, it's no, it's people
Mhm.
like me. You guys know that. And I kind of went on social media on Facebook and live and I kind of cried because I was like, I just
Oh, wow.
want to make sure that this is okay for me and it's not going to affect my fertility. I just want a bit of time. And then
Mhm.
and then I got mad,
Mhm.
like, because I was like, wow, now people are telling me I'm all these things that I am not. And it was just like the most
Wow.
wild situation I think I've ever been in. And so the trucker convoy was, I literally broke down in tears and I was like, holy shit, I'm not alone,
Mm.
because the
Yes.
media had portrayed that it was just Nazis and all that were supporting it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I am not one of those things.
Yeah.
Like, not, I'm not like, my family isn't Jewish, but like we have descendants from
Mhm.
there. Like, that is not, no, like, I am not
Mhm.
that. Like,
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
was a real eye opener that the media can completely spin something that it's not just off one tiny detail, and the mob that can. So that tuned
Mhm.
me to be like, now I need to question everything. And then it just went from there. So yeah, I agree
Yeah.
that they just blew that up. And I'm glad that you said that about the Freedom Convoy, because I think that was a big moment for a lot of Canadians to understand, okay, why is the prime minister saying this? It's not just like a
Mhm.
really upset liberal website saying this. Our prime minister is alluding to these kind of things. That's
Correct.
crazy.
And yeah, Brandy, I'm so like it just breaks my heart that you felt the ramifications of that
Totally.
in your day-to-day life. Like that's not the state society that um I grew to idolize in Canada, and it's so
Right.
wild how quickly it changed. Um
It was
and
in the
so
words.
yeah.
I even said, like, can you please stop? And I think this comes to words. Like, big thing about wording, right? Was it's just people are very
Mhm.
comfortable saying this group of people, and we see it through, I think, all
Mhm.
movements, like the unvaccinated should die. So I was like, can you
Hmm.
just replace that word with my name, please? The next time you say stuff like that, put a person to it. Let's humanize these
Wow.
words that you're saying, because I think the disconnect from being around individuals at that time had people forget that we were human beings. And it's like when you're watching TV and you watch murder and you're watching all this, it seems easier to digest. So it was almost like people were looking at these people they knew in real life and associating them to this like show that's not real life. But you're like, no, I'm a real life person. And when you go on your Facebook and you say unvaccinated people don't deserve health care, that's me. That's me. And so what am I
Wow.
supposed to, how am I digesting that? So I'm like questioning my
Mhm.
whole, and I was like, am I being selfish? And I was like, I
Right.
guess wanting to preserve my fertility is selfish. And it was quite a mind mess. So that's why I started being vocal about it,
Mhm.
because I was like, I don't think everyone is fully understanding that you're talking about your brothers and sisters here, the people that you
Mhm.
love. We're not doing this out of harm, out of hate. You want me out of society? Bye. I'll go. I have a gym at home. I love my cats. I love my man. I got enough cannabis here. We're good. Yeah, deliver me, skip the dishes. We fine. Like I will do this to make people comfortable for a bit until we understand,
Yep.
right? I was all
Yep.
for that, but man, it was
Mhm.
a trip. So thank you for validating that, because even to
Of
this day, I
course.
know a lot of people like myself that are too afraid to even talk about that experience, because it was a hard time, and I think that we don't repeat it by talking about it. But people still aren't ready, so we're just like, well, let's just pause on that talk for a little bit, but we got to go back to it and be like, how did that happen? How did we allow this to happen? As people, are we going to do it again? Because I don't want to do it again.
Right. And I think there's very few things in our lives that we can say as Canadians that have really united us as Canadians and is distinct from the rest of the world.
That's right.
Um, and I think this was an inflection point for Canada to say, wow, the entire world saw what happened in February 2022. And to me, I wrote letters all the time to
Mhm.
Trudeau about specifically the violations of the Charter rights and freedoms that the
Thank you.
Emergencies Act did.
Yeah,
And
good
to
for
me,
you.
it was not like a question, it was a
Mhm.
duty as a Canadian to say, you are going too far now.
Yeah.
Replace, Freedom Convoy with any other protest, Black Lives Matter.
Oh,
What would happen if
no.
that were the case?
Outrage.
Right? Outrage.
Outrage.
Outrage out
Outrage.
of this world.
Yeah.
So what makes this so different? Now you can say
Mhm.
that, okay, well, there's this vaccine mandate and these people are defying it. It's like, okay, let's take that at face value and say,
Mhm.
are they really defying it, or are they questioning your enforcement of the vaccine? And at what point do we say
100%.
to ourselves, this is Brandy's body, Brandy's choice? Thinking back on the vaccine, my honest opinion is it should never have been mandated.
Yeah.
it should actually have always been a choice. And if that
Always.
were the language, we would have seen
Hmm.
perhaps the same rates of vaccine uptake
Yep.
that we've seen to this
Totally.
day, because it would have been more of a choice, and people would have made the choice if they wanted to or not, but they would have done so in a more informed
Free
way
will.
and
Yeah.
not exactly, not in a forced way. And
Yes.
I don't find that as a wild opinion. I think what
Nope.
also is very odd about the Freedom Convoys, and I interviewed Jenna, who was
Hmm.
photographed at a Freedom Convoy rally and was
Yeah.
fired from her job for that.
Yeah,
Like,
I do
what
remember. I
society
followed
are
her
we
just
living
right
in?
after that. I think I followed her and Paul Minder around the same time. We had
Palminder,
a
yeah.
yeah. We also had a girl, Sasha, that was down. We interviewed her, and I think our third seasons when we really came out of. We're like, okay, we're done. Like we're done. We're talking
Mhm.
about this season three. Let's go. And we had
Right.
Sasha was
Good for
down there,
you.
and she was collecting because of the banker accounts being frozen. She was actually getting
Oh,
gift
Jesus.
certificates and gift cards, and then bringing them to the truckers. So then there was no way for it to be locked
Wow.
down. So she was collecting money and going to buy gift cards and then handing those out to the truckers on the street. So there was no way for the government to shut that down or be involved in
Wow.
people's money. We're actually being able to go help them. So we also interviewed her because, like I said,
Mm.
that moment, I've never been a person to like cry on social media. And that's not to say that I think it's a
Mhm.
bad thing. It's just something I've never been that upset about something. And when that happened, I
Mhm.
just like, I don't know why I just felt compelled to. And it just
Mhm.
felt so good to finally come out and be like, this has been hurting me for months. I don't feel safe in my own country.
Wow.
When they told us we couldn't travel at first, when they said boats, my family's on Vancouver Island, so immediately
Mm.
I'm like, oh my god, I can't go see my family. And they're like, well, they can't do that because it's a highway. And I'm like, but y'all said that they couldn't do this to begin with. Like, I remember when everyone was like, they'll never mandate it. I'm like, don't say never,
Mhm.
because like it's just egotistical to say never, because anything is possible in this world now. We've seen it, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, wild times.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's crazy that something can go on social media and you can lose your income for just standing for what you think is right. Like, I think
Mhm.
I seen something that you had mentioned about like political talk at work, and
Mhm.
I feel like sometimes there's people that you absolutely can, and then some people it's just not a good idea sometimes.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I are on the side of just being like, we all agree to disagree on some things, and let's just like find our common ground. And I think that's a beautiful way of doing it, because not
Mhm.
everybody's going to agree, but you could be respectful. Like, where did
Yes.
we become? It's like we have one different opinion, therefore we cannot talk anymore. Like,
Yes.
when did that
Exactly.
happen? When did
Exactly.
that happen? Anyways, to Jenna, the Freedom
Yes.
Convoy, how was that
Yeah.
with her? Like, she still lost her job still from that? Do you know if she's been gone back to work?
Yeah, Jenna's it was really tough because she was ostracized from her entire community and her family. It was such a, she got emotional talking about it, and rightfully
Totally.
so. And having a young daughter at the time, you know, that income, being a
It's
single
needed.
mother, it was just brutal for her. Exactly. So luckily she's been able to, put the pieces back together, be
Hmm.
employed, get her life back together. But during that time, it was just so wild how quickly, and I always say this, you know, Canada is one, our government is so inefficient on so many things, whether it's
So many.
transit, healthcare, etc. But
So
locking
many.
us down, they were so brutally efficient.
So,
Um,
so,
and it
so
happened.
to the point. Like, why
Right.
can't you come together for other things that we actually need, in the promises that you have
Yeah.
made in the past? I think a lot of people that
Right.
didn't pay attention to politics over the last couple of years is like, okay, it's time to start paying
Yeah.
attention. It's like, oh, we're
Correct.
Canada, we're Canadian, like we're fine,
Yeah.
it's fine. And then all of a sudden we're like, the pandemic hit, we're like, we're not fine, fam. We're not fine. We need to start getting
No.
involved, right? We can't just
Yes.
leave this to the powers to be. And I think that was another thing I seen that you had said, like, should we be putting faith in government? And I think
Right.
like we need to have accountability. We need to be like, you said these things, you didn't do these things. Now, please, why? Instead of it just like, I can't watch House of Common things because I just get so frustrated at this ball that just gets passed back and forth. I'm like, someone answer a
Mhm.
fucking question.
Yeah.
Please,
100%.
please, like, I'm trying to have faith in the system and hope that that can be rebuilt, but y'all are making it real hard, like.
Yep. Definitely. I think also you're totally right. And I think it's the at the end of the day, a politician's job is to count the votes, sell to voters, fundraise,
Mhm.
and get, more under their tent. And
Mhm.
it's the oldest game, and I get that, right? Like whether it's Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, or
Yeah,
Trudeau, their whole goal is to just increase membership, increase fundraising, so that they can
totally.
go to their board and be like, I'm the leader because I did this for our party.
Yeah.
Where I think we get confused with politicians, and I'm definitely going to post something about this, but we think that they're thought leaders when they're
Yes.
not. They're just salespeople for their party. Like,
Yeah.
what do I care about Justin Trudeau's opinion about abortion? The
Yes.
opinion about abortion must come from civil society. It
Yeah.
must.
Yeah.
It can't be vested in an individual. It
Hmm.
has to be from civil society because we reflect back to the politicians their blind spots, the things they don't even see. We
Totally.
create their platforms, we make them. And if it weren't for more people standing out for housing, infrastructure, or sorry, inflation, interest rates, Pierre Poilievre's playbook would not be written.
Hmm.
Instead, it's written by the
What
fact that
people are
so
saying.
many of us exactly are having
Yeah.
these dinner table conversations about, I can't afford my house, I can't afford my, like, saving for my kids'
Groceries.
education, can't afford groceries tonight. And suddenly these politicians are like, yeah, like that's our platform. And
That's our bait.
it's not the other. Yeah, it should never be the other way around. And that's where I felt the Freedom Convoy was very much, we vested all this power into these politicians to make the decisions for us. Like,
Hmm.
no,
No. Yeah.
we decide whether there's vaccine mandates. We decide whether or not we should
Yes.
travel. Like, the federal government should reflect. And that was the challenge I saw. Trudeau did not go out and talk to the truckers. And like, that was the
Mm-mm.
biggest, like, slap in the
Downfall.
face to civil society, right?
Yep.
Like, civil
Not even
society is
giving
made
the
up of all
second.
types of, exactly.
Yeah.
It's made
And,
up of
and
all different voices. And
and that was one thing I was very confused of the most, that I started seeing, like, you guys are going to eat your trouble, like yourselves, in this argument, because you're saying that these are terrible people, but this all these people are from all walks of life. So
right,
in one moment you're saying, like, we need to uplift these minorities, which I'm not saying that they don't, absolutely
of
they
course.
do, but at the same time, all of a sudden, because they have, again, a different view for you for whatever reason, religious,
Mm-hmm.
health, whatever their choice was, they were now trash. It's like, okay, so they're
Mm-hmm.
only okay. And that's where I started to get confused. I'm like, okay, I'm struggling to follow, like, where I should be supporting here, so I can support them in
Yeah.
this topic, but the minute that they fall under this topic, therefore I can't. But then
Mm-hmm.
if they're over here, then I can. And it started being like, can't we just all be individuals and just, like, respect that? And that's where my biggest
Mm-hmm.
thing was, it's like, maybe you don't believe in the Freedom Convoy, and maybe this mandate didn't affect you in a way, but what if tides were turned and they said you couldn't ever get a vaccine, and you're never allowed to have them
Right.
ever, they are completely banned, if you were caught taking one, locking you up in prison, we're going to freeze your bank
Mm-hmm.
account. If the
Mm-hmm.
would you be would people be comfortable with that? Probably not, right? They should have access to
Right.
those things. Because I don't want them, that doesn't mean that I don't believe that they don't have merit, that they don't have value, that they're good for other individuals. And it just seemed like
Correct.
that was such a controversial thing to say.
Yeah.
But that just ignited me to continue talking about some of those things. Like, the minute it's a hot topic button, I'm like, let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we talk
Yeah.
about it? I seen, like, you posted, just was it yesterday? I think it was. Sorry, I was trying to, like, make sure that
Yeah.
I
I
was on
know.
top of what you're saying, was about, like, why can't we talk about abortion, right? Like, why can't we
Yeah.
talk about these heavy topics that they are
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, but that's the only way that we bring awareness, change, all of that beauty that comes from bad
Mm-hmm.
traumas, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it sucks if you can't talk about it. I get it. I have infertility. So obviously, where I'm going to see that topic is going to be very different than someone else that, is
Mm-hmm.
in a different situation. I still respect
Yes.
that. Right. But
Right.
in moments of your healing, there's been moments where I've been like, don't talk to me about it. I am not ready to talk about this,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm coming
Correct.
from a very biased view right now, and I'm not
Right.
healed yet. Right. But
Yes.
sometimes you don't have
Correct.
that awareness. So what would you say was your biggest learning lesson by doing all of this? Like, was it the technical part, your opinions, clipping
Mm-hmm.
content?
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely, man. There's so many lessons I learned from just doing terrible editing, and now even now I'm like, Jesus, I really need to be better at this. But it takes time. And I was telling a friend,
Totally.
yeah, it takes like 3-4 days to really think through a good reel, and it's
Yeah.
not easy, right? You have to do spend hours thinking about it. Um, but I will say the biggest thing that I've ever learned is, episode one, I faced a dragon, and I think that's the biggest challenge for me, as I'm a very spiritual person, and so one thing that I always wrestle with is, how far do I take these questions that I have? And if I don't take it far, then I'm turning my back on that spirit inside me that's yearning to come out.
Mhm.
And that to me is like a mortal sin.
Mhm.
So a mortal sin would, for me, would be having a question about abortion and never asking it.
Mhm.
Because to me, it's like, well, now I'm purposely not
Avoiding
allowing
it.
my spirit to come out
Mhm.
and address that dragon.
Mhm.
Um, and that to me is like so sinful because I'm given the platform to do so and push the upper edges of what our public discourse could be.
Mhm.
And I would be, in such a difficult state if I were to look back saying I had the opportunity and I just decided to take my ball and run home.
Mhm.
And it's not just abortion or freedom convoy; it's
No,
anything,
anything. Yep.
capital punishment,
Yep.
basic income, anything. It's
Yep.
like these questions exist in your mind, and you don't even know why.
Yes.
Like we can't explain the why, but we
No.
have to explain the how.
Mhm.
And the challenge is to articulate that in a clear way so that others can get what you're saying, because I think so many of us have the same question, but
Totally.
we're struggling with how to come out in a
And say it.
respectful way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
that's been
that's,
the biggest learning for me.
yeah, I think that's the finesse that podcasters can have, right? And the ones that
Hmm.
do so speak on controversial things in such a good way that I think I was watching, I don't know if you've seen the Jordan Peterson and Matt Rife uh, interview that was this week. Um,
No.
it was really good. If you have time to watch it, it was a very good episode. It's very, like, the two of them just
Mm,
like went off together. And
nice.
Jordan kind of just said that, you have to talk about the hard things, but you have to you get a finesse of doing that kind of like in a light way, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
that's why sometimes some comedians are like, why people find dark humor
Hmm.
kind of healing, because it's like, for me, you know, although like people make jokes, let's say, quote unquote, about dead babies, like, there's some
Mm,
people, I've been able to laugh at that now, but 5 years ago that was not something
yeah.
that I could laugh at, right? So it's like,
Right.
it was such a beautiful way of saying, like, that's when you can see where you kind of are in your healing journey, as well as when
Hmm.
things like that can kind of be talked about, because then it is bringing like, we need to talk about it. It's so not talked about,
Yeah.
and that's where it creates shame for women and men too. Like, I've
Yeah.
watched men struggle with women getting abortions and them not being a part of that conversation. And that was a whole other
Hmm.
side of,
Right.
a conversation that I didn't even know existed. But because we started
Hmm.
talking about it, it opened up this other side. I was like, I never thought about how men are being affected by these things, right? And I was like,
Right.
wow,
100%.
because I opened myself up to this conversation, I now learned of a whole other problem and other side of this conversation that deserves some
Hmm.
light as well. And so, yeah, I think it's good to talk about
Correct.
the hard
Yeah.
stuff. As
Yeah.
much as it's
Yeah. Of
uncomfortable
course.
sometimes, you're like, oh no, is
Yeah.
this the moment I'm getting canceled? Like, is this it? Is this it?
This is it. This is it. This is the moment I can point to it.
It's been
Um,
fun. I've, 6 seasons. It's been good. Like, let's just close this. I'll sell everything.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you
I'll
for the
sell
time.
it. No, totally. I'm there with you, and um, it's also, I think a lot of people don't realize, as progressive as Canada is, the conversation changes a lot when it comes
Mhm.
when we're pushed up to these upper limits, right? Like again, Freedom Convoy, we're pushed to the upper limits when people see, bank accounts being frozen,
Yeah, that
um,
was so wild.
or it was so wild to
I
think
was
that
like, oh my
actually
God,
happened.
what's going to happen? And I was like, okay.
Right.
And we're like, everyone, I think even on a little level, it's like, oh, I sent $10. That's all I could do. And you're like, oh my God, is my bank like,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
very terrifying, I think, to just see that that is a possibility. And what made
Yes.
those people, the people that are the chosen ones, were they just like by random, like, oh, you're
Hmm.
the ones that we're going to arrest at like like I was watching the Freedom Convoy. I was watching up until shit got real hostile too. I was like glued, and I was
Hmm.
working from home, and I was like, shit is so intense. And all the horses
Yeah.
came out, and I was like, I
Yeah.
like felt like, I don't know if you felt it through, like you said, your spiritual,
Hmm.
like I just felt, and I was like, this is not my country. This is like, oh,
Hmm.
it was just the craziest thing. And oh, anyways,
Yeah.
yes, keep going back
Yes.
to
No,
that, but it's just nice to talk about,
yeah.
because we haven't really talked about that since initially, and it's been such a, like you said, the world was watching. And
The world was watching. Yeah.
I had all the guests that we've had from previous, like we had a gal from Shanghai, Elizabeth. She was
Mm.
cheering us on. She was like, "I'm so proud of you guys, Canadians," and it was like a moment where like
Mhm.
we're not looked at as like the pussy Canadians. Like, yes, we look like we're strong. You know, like we're not just following the Americas. We're doing it
Uh,
ourselves. Like, come
yeah.
on, guys. Like, good job, truckers. You know, like it was it was I think it
I
was our
love
shining
that.
moment, you know, like we
Yeah.
got poutine and we've got timbits and we've got the
Yeah.
trucker convoy, in my opinion, because whether you were for it or not, I think you could see a humanitarian movement. It wasn't
Yeah.
one race, it wasn't one culture, it wasn't one class, it
Yeah.
wasn't one, it was all walks of life being like, we're done. Let's come together now.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, we all
Yeah.
don't agree, but let's agree to disagree and
Yeah.
make sure this is a free country. Because, like I said, what if they flip the script and was like, Canada's never buying vaccines? How would you feel if that you would want us that didn't that would
Mhm.
be like okay, to be
Mhm.
on your side to not let that happen?
Correct. Exactly. And as progressive as Canada and Canadians are, all you have to do is just, uh, you know, touch that question, like edit it just a little bit. So, for example, capital punishment. Most Canadians are against capital punishment, but enter the name Paul Bernardo
Mm-hmm.
or Robert Picton
Mm-hmm.
or any, vile murderer, and suddenly many Canadians are like, I can see the merit there. I
Yeah,
can suddenly see the merit.
yeah.
Um, or, similar with abortion, okay,
Mm-hmm.
third trimester. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
mm,
I
14-year-old
struggle with
going
that.
back for their fifth, right, fifth or sixth. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting when I talk to both pro-life and pro-choice groups, both sides, and this was amazing because I never thought this would ever be possible, but both sides actually agreed. I know.
Holy shit! Mark it on that
I
calendar.
know.
I gotta write this down.
Right? I was like, I did something productive in my life if this is the only thing ever.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And they were just like both sides agreed more education's absolutely necessary for both
Totally.
young
Both
men and
sides.
young women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Both sides said,
yeah. So I say being someone
um,
that got kind of like brutalized by birth control as a young teen, like there was no education
right,
on that. It was like immediately, oh, like, oh,
exactly.
you've got acne, you're at that age, let's just put you on birth control
Yeah.
and out the door. I didn't need my
Right.
parents
Yeah.
there. I needed nothing, right? And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why I raise such big flags right now, even for like not even the political part of like the LGBTQ community, more just so let's talk about what hormones have done to young teenage girls. Let's talk about what they
Yes.
did to Puerto Ricans when it all came out. Let's talk about the history of that, excuse me. And then let's say I have been hurt by that by blocking my natural cycle as a teenager and for a
Mm-hmm.
decade, and I'm just
Wow.
saying, yo, this wasn't good and we've normalized this. Can we put a pause or just like a conversation on what is now this new idea of, let's say, Lupron or all those puberty blockers? It's not to say
Mm-hmm.
that not to affirm or not to validate those feelings. I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
had I known about this as a teenager and known that as an adult I'm going to have such big struggles, miscarriage, all of that, would
Mm.
I have gone through that? I don't know. Maybe I would have, but it would have been nice to be
Yeah.
informed, right? And that's where it's like the minute
100%.
I bring it up, it's now that I'm transphobic and I'm home and I'm like that
Mm-hmm.
yo, that's not what I'm saying. Let's take the political out of it for a second. I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying I got abused by hormone, essentially blockers in its own right because it stops your cycle
Mm-hmm.
as a woman. This is the damage it did to me. These are
Wow.
known damages that could be done. I was not informed, and nobody opens that pamphlet and reads it because no one can
Mm-hmm.
fucking understand it, you know. Like, and I was
Yeah. Yeah.
16, and sex is sold to you that you're the
Yeah.
most popular if you have sex. You're like, well, I better be on it so I can
Mm-hmm.
have sex, so I can be the top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so sad, like to come full at 37 years old and being like, well, that wasn't great, and that's where I'm just putting up
Mm-hmm.
these warnings of like, you know that sucked for me. So can we just make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we're moving forward in like the smartest manner, not running on like emotions or feelings, and like really have this conversation? And I say to people too, like if you're against puberty blockers for that community, then what are you saying to the 16, 17, 15, 13-year olds that are going on birth control? Like,
Right. Wow.
can we be
That is
mad
so
about the
interesting.
same thing? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, not the same because I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
like they come with different, but let's just high level that for a second. It's about your hormones and it's about
Mm-hmm.
sexuality and that's, hypersexualized conversation. What do we do in that, both sides here? Is that been great? Can we look at women in birth control? I'd say most people my age would say, no, it's really messed me up in all of these ways.
Wow.
So, shouldn't we, as that generation that went through it, put a raised flag and say, yo, this sucked? Not saying we don't go ahead with it. I'm not gonna, I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
do we then also hyper watch that and see what that's doing? Because we've normalized this so much now. And it's sad how many people have
Wow.
infertility from of it, right? So questions I
That is
have at
so
night.
that's so interesting, Brandy. I feel like that should be we should talk after about doing a podcast on that because
Yes, of course.
I'm
Totally.
really interested in that because I think that again is a conversation and again there's like,
So many.
masculinity involved and
Yes.
femininity and no one talks
Yeah, and
about,
the energy.
men
Yeah.
in 16, talking
Yeah.
about anyways, but
Yeah.
that's so interesting. And
Yeah.
those are the questions. Again, all you have to do is slightly edit that question. When we talk about puberty blockers, it's like, okay, birth control.
Yeah.
And suddenly the
People are
question
like, shit.
percolates, right?
Yeah. And I'm
Yes.
a person that
And
likes
that's
devil's advocate, right? I'm like you. Like I am,
right.
if I vote, I'm very okay and firm in my belief that I will vote conservative. I've
Hmm.
done, I believe in like Pierre, even though sometimes I'm like, this is stupid, but I'm like, if it's
Sure.
gonna, I'm gonna, that, and I'm okay
Yeah.
with that opinion. I don't worry about that. But at the same time, I'm
Hmm.
more of a centrist and I like to pose the question on both sides. Okay.
Yes.
If you're going to get mad about this,
Yeah.
then can we look at the like because I'm going to come with all the arguments that they're going to come at me, so I'm going to
Yeah.
build a defense and I'm going to say on both sides here what are the arrows that are going to be pointed so we can kind of loop that together, right? Like if you're just
Hmm.
as mad as this, can we please look at this because this has been normalized? And if we look at that and say, yeah, I'm mad about that because it's been normalized and I'm trying to stop it from being normalized over here without informed consent, to me you have a
Hmm.
valid argument. But if you're just like, I'm
Yeah.
just mad about this, then you're going to have the people that come with the argument saying you are homophobic, you are misogynist, or whatever. You know what I mean? Those
Hmm.
most unfortunately becoming buzzwords now, instead of
Yeah.
having weight to those words. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
it's just like that's where I've like clapped back to like the right. I'm like, hey, cool, but we're all for, like, and let's
Yeah.
talk about plastic surgery. I'm not okay with women getting it, and I'm not okay that trans women have to do that all the time, and the money and the pain and the risk that they have to put themselves in to be accepted. I'm not okay with
Hmm.
either of it, right? It's not
Right.
for one or the other. It's the industries, and I think that's where people get the divide, is that they think that you have to then be one side or the other. But can we just, again, let's get the politics out of here and look at
Hmm.
baseline, you know, look at
Yeah.
hormone blocking, hormone messing as this, not anything else. Is this smart
Ex-
or whatever?
exactly. And correct. And I think that this is what you've just described is precisely the role of civil society. It's not the role of our politicians or our political parties to define to us what policies on birth control and puberty
Mm-hmm.
blockers there should be. No, we
Totally.
reflect back to our politicians what
What we
those
see.
policies should be.
Yeah.
Correct. And so that's the really powerful role that podcasters, um, not-for-profit organizations have in this space. And one thing that and we've mentioned it, but like when people start throwing around transphobia or
Mm-hmm.
homophobia, we as civil society have to push back against that and say, hang
Yep.
on, there are real concerns about exposing, let's say, young people to, you know,
Sexual
um,
things.
sexual things before they hit adolescence, and that
Mm-hmm.
we cannot deny many parents have concerns. And you can call it transphobia if that helps you wrap your mind around it, but
Yeah.
that's not actually what it is. What it is are legitimate concerns from parents about exposing their children to any type of sexual
Any.
content
I
before
don't want any
they
of it.
hit.
I don't
Correct.
want any
Right.
of it. And as a person that was
Right.
like raised in the MTV like Playboy era,
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
hypersexualized as a teenager. So
Right.
again, another flag. I'm like, Playboy, OnlyFans, porn, all of this up. Again,
Yeah.
not saying it doesn't have a place, but what is it
Of
doing to
course.
our society, and what is it doing to the
Yeah.
family unit, to women, to men, to our family, to
Hmm.
children? We deserve to have these conversations. But again, you do it, you're not women empowerment if you question that. And it's like, okay,
Hmm.
well, y'all, they invited like they invented a whole plastic surgery because of the porn industry and told women that they need to like updo their bits, and
Yeah.
then trans women need to like. And
Yeah.
I'm not a women empowerment because I'm saying, yo, you don't need that. So let's break that apart. Like it's
Hmm.
incredibly wild to me.
Yeah.
But I think it offers good conversation, and then I learn a lot too because I'll go from like a whole
Hmm.
circle being like plastic surgery shouldn't exist, and then someone will be like,
Yeah.
well, what about this? I'm like, ah, yes, you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
that deserves space. I get it. Okay, I see where I
Right.
am, right? And
Right.
it's been
Yeah.
beautiful. And like you said, as a podcaster, it's nice to be able to highlight just experiences, and not having a bias of being like your opinion matters, whether you're right or you're left, or if you're conservative or liberal or
Hmm.
whatever. I don't care about that. I care about you as a
Correct.
human, and what was your
Yeah.
experience, and what do you feel, and how can I support, and what's your story, and what
Hmm.
do you want to share with the world? I love advocating for people, that go from like their trauma to their healing. What would be the
Yes,
most
correct.
episode that you're like the most proud of? Like, was there any particular one that you're like, this is it for me?
Mhm. I thought about this for a while, and episode one, behind my laptop mic because I didn't have a microphone or camera or anything. I mean, it took a lot. It took a lot for me to actually post that, and I listen back, and I'm like, Jesus, I actually posted that.
I know.
um,
I can
but
imagine.
there've been moments in the podcast space where it was just incredible. So I did a series on tobacco control, and
Yep.
it culminated bringing together people who advocate for tobacco control and those who advocate for more of a human centered approach, meaning like, let's talk about the individual who's currently addicted to cigarettes and put
Mhm.
them at the center of policy.
Yep.
And that was really interesting that all these different sides decide to come on because it's a very tense space, the
Yeah.
tobacco space.
I can imagine. I'm in
Right?
cannabis,
So
pretty close. I get it.
there you go. Exactly. So bringing together people who were like 100%, I am not coming on if that person's on. I'm
Yeah,
not doing that. Like bringing those people together was actually really cool. And it was just like
that
gave
is
me
cool.
goosebumps.
Yeah.
um, Interviewing Judith Curry, so a climatologist who is totally excommunicated from academia because of her questioning of the UN's climate change modeling. And this is from an academic who studied the modeling. And, she was ostracized for that, excommunicated. And I just think there's so many researchers out there who, similarly to Judith, have said, yeah, like I'm not only excommunicated, but I bet you there's many more researchers who just say, I'm going to research this insert social justice issue
Yep.
because I know I'm still going to get paid by the university or by the academic institution. I'm not going to
100%.
follow my academic interest, which is
Yep.
questioning the
This.
UN climate change or,
Yep. Yep.
the financial efficacy of Black Lives Matter. Like what
Yep.
happened to that money? Like I'm not going to do
Yes.
that because
No.
I could get
It's gonna.
fired.
Yeah.
And
I'll be
how
canceled.
worse off, yeah, how
Yep.
worse off is our public discourse as a result.
Yeah, and it is, and that makes me so sad. And I think we've seen that a lot during the pandemic. It was like
Yeah.
nurses and doctors and anybody that was medical, but not like direct, like virologists, like their opinions were shit. And you're just like, okay,
Hmm.
hold on, listen to the experts. Okay, but not again, not these experts. And that's where to me it's like
Yeah.
the minute you start picking and choosing where your information and your research come from, that's where I start getting a red flag going, okay, hold on, this seems super biased. Like if you look at breast implants, for example, you won't
Hmm.
see as much research on the illness of it because that's not making anybody money, right? Like the
Mm.
people that make them, they don't finish up their studies. I've had many women on our show that have started being part of the research of the aftermath, but those they just end. Those studies don't complete. So then they don't have to be like, no, these are dangerous. And then these women have to fight for their lives saying, it's
Hmm.
my breast implants, and their surgeons are like, I don't know what they're talking about. That's not a diagnosis. Like that's not, no one's done research for that, da, da, da. And it's like that's actually not in fact true. And if you look at all
Hmm.
these women's experiences, there's something to be said about that, and it just made it.
Hmm.
And I think we've seen that again. Sorry, I was going back to like, they didn't want to lose their jobs, and they didn't want to say like, hey, maybe this vaccine wasn't a good idea, maybe masks aren't a good idea. And I'm not saying any of those things are, but the fact that
Hmm.
you couldn't say something in that profession when you are quote unquote an expert, but you still couldn't
Hmm.
talk about it if it didn't run the narrative. And I feel like we're seeing that now in
Hmm.
schools. Teachers cannot go against
Yes.
what is happening, and the minute that they do, they're fired,
Hmm.
they're exonerated, and it's like, aren't they allowed to raise something when they're the ones that have been around the children the most? Aren't they the experts
Yeah.
that we should be listening to? And if someone
Correct.
opposes, can we just bring them together and talk? But instead we're just like, shh, no, don't talk.
Hmm.
What is that? What is that?
Correct. And exactly. And I had this wonderful conversation with a professor, and this is an interesting, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Here's an interesting thought. So both of us were basically the same age. We grew up in a time right before the internet, so we still remember
Yeah,
childhood
I miss
pre-internet.
it. I miss it so
Right?
much. I
We're
miss
like we're like
cartoons on
yeah.
Saturday, like racing to the
Yeah.
bathroom and
Yes.
like going to Blockbuster and like your movie's not there. Like
Oh
I
my
don't know if
god.
it's the age or it's just a generation. Like you kids had no idea. Like I'm
No
at that
idea.
age. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. We're
So
going to be saying
simple.
that for the next like 30,
Ah,
40 years,
fuck.
we'll be and but we're literally the last generation that remembers childhood without the internet. And
Yeah.
today everything is chat GPTable,
Oh,
everything's
you
Googleable.
can't.
I think back to high school, I was struggling with algebra and chemistry. It's like now I could just go on chat GPT and be like, can
Just
you
do
break
it.
this down for me?
Yeah.
or can you do this for
Do
me?
it
Yeah.
for me. Yeah.
And so
Like,
do it for me and like let me
like,
figure it out. I'll
yeah.
figure it out. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Um, so
Participation
then
trophies. It's fine.
right. So you don't need a teacher to teach you those things anymore. You
Mhm.
need a teacher perhaps for more socialization, understanding the world around you, the complexity of the world. And
Yep.
so is the role of school changing? It's no longer a place where Christopher and Brandy need to get their algebraic equations right before
Mhm.
they pass grade 9. It's like Christopher and Brandy need to go so they understand how to interact with a complex society with
Mhm.
gender identity, sexual orientation,
Mhm.
race, ethnicity, culture. It's like, okay, now is only the role of school socialization? Is
Interesting.
that a question we're willing to kind of really start thinking about? Because
Mhm.
then what does that look like? And what topics are on and off? And, what's uncomfortable that should be in there? What's comfortable and should be in there? Parents will have all types of questions about this, but the role of school, I think, is really changing for sure.
Yes, I agree. And I think it's very interesting to the big change of like where homeschool was looked at, let's say, as a
Yes.
weird thing. Like you were a weird kid if you were homeschooled. And now it's
Hmm.
almost a very much where parents are looking at that as a privilege because, like you said,
Yeah.
school has changed so much for it's like, and,
Hmm.
that's a good point of being like, is it the way that we've progressed in that we can have that information on Google and kids could look at it? Because I'd argue that
Hmm.
they're probably not looking at it, because they're on TikTok and
Yeah.
like not really
Yeah.
learning those things. So it's like, I think that,
Definitely.
right, we have to have that. But what
Yeah.
worries me is I
Yeah.
hear now is that the standards to passing school, it's not, when we went to school, it was if you were
Hmm.
struggling, you were held back, you were worked on, you were circled about
Yeah.
how, why weren't you understanding that to being now teachers are just,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying it's teachers' fault, but it's just being passed to the next grade and that's not being
Yeah.
addressed. And people are just going through and then all of a sudden they come to real life and you're
Mhm.
at work and you don't really have the excuses of like you do in school to not completing your stuff. Like there's no time
Mhm.
blindness, there's no whatever that video was where she was
Yeah.
like, I can't be on time to work, it's a mental disorder. I was like,
Oh, yeah.
no, that's just not having time management, my dude. Like, figure it out.
Yeah,
I'm a
exactly.
stoner and I still get everywhere I need to go on time. Okay. Like, you don't got me here. So, and like, and it makes me sad because, like, yes, I want every kid to feel validated and that their
Yeah.
contribution to a sport is good and that they did a good job. But if we
Yeah.
don't start, like, putting boundaries, like you said, like,
Mhm.
we can't just open up abortion to everything because then it's like, okay, people can argue conception. That's fine. Everyone can have
Yeah.
their belief of when that is. But when can we all agree, like, that's too much? That might,
Yeah.
and have those extremes met with some accountability. And that's what we see, I
Mhm.
think, when we have movements and the extremes aren't allowed to be questioned, then
Correct.
people that go against those movements look at those extremes and use those as fuel, as in like, okay, so some drag queens are pedophiles, therefore all of them are. And it's like, no, no, no,
Right.
no, no,
Mhm.
no, 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 no. But if the drag queens aren't holding those guys accountable and they say that they don't
Right.
exist, then to me
Right.
that's a problem, right? Then it's like
Correct.
you're being blind to the badness that could happen in your movement. And if your movement
Mhm.
can hold the extremes accountable, be like, hey, let's dial this in a little bit. Let's make
Mhm.
sure that there's safety things in place or whatever that is. Let's work
Yeah.
together so everyone feels safe. Like, why can't as a society we do that? Like, that's where I hope we go one day. Like, I hope all of this is showing us that we can have differences, but still be respectful and learn. And then when we learn, we're not so mad,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And exactly. And some of the most, I mean, successful, if you can call it successful movements around the world
Mhm.
have been those that have, I hate to say the word purge, but those who have really done deep work inside the movement to figure out, like you say, those bad apples and say
Mhm.
you're not part of this movement because
Yes.
this movement has a singular aim, and it does take a lot of work to do that in
Mhm.
self-reflection because I can see a movement going off the rails very easily once
Very
it
easy.
gets mainstream attention and more
Yes.
people and you've got millions of followers and money's coming in. Like I sometimes feel, I know this sounds odd, but I do feel for the financial um you know controllers inside the BLM movement because
Mhm.
after George Floyd there was this influx of celebrity endorsements,
Mhm.
millions more on their social media. I mean that alone, then money starts coming in from all walks,
Like,
everywhere is coming, all over
I'm
the
Scrooge
world, and you're like,
McDuck. What's going on?
what's going on? Where did this? Do I have to pay taxes on this? Like, how does
Yeah.
this work? Like, what do I have to do? And so
What's
suddenly it's
embezzlement?
like,
Like, I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. What is
Like,
investment? What if I buy this property?
yeah.
Like, you suddenly get you're just given the
You're not
world, and so
prepared.
it's you're not prepared, and
No.
how could you be, right?
No,
How
you
could you
don't
ever
know.
be?
Yep.
it's only natural that people go mad with money and power
Yes.
and fame and buy
Yeah.
properties and buy nice things because they're getting so much in, they have to spend it immediately, otherwise the IRS is going to come in. So,
There's so
anyways, all
much
that
to it.
said, so much to it, and
Mhm.
we're human, and often we hold these movements to be to be perfect, right?
Yes. Yep.
Black Lives Matter, you must be perfect. The Freedom Convoy, you must be some racist,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
support it. So because you're not, this singular movement. So it's
Yeah.
like we have to be able to build some more empathy into our discourse a little bit.
Totally. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy how it can really do that. And you're just like, no. And one big thing I like to say on the show too is like so many truths can exist at the same time. And I think
Yes.
again, people get very misguided in that, where it's like, I
Yeah.
believe in women having the ability to have an abortion. At the same time, I believe that there should be some boundaries on that. I
Sure.
believe that there should be conversation. Absolutely. If you have gender
Yeah.
confusion in school, that should be, you should have a safe place to go to. Maybe there's a course that's like an elective course that we could take. If your parents are
Hmm.
comfortable, if you're comfortable, you have counselors there. But let's leave the
Hmm.
like sexuality part out of it, because that makes a lot of people comfortable, whether that's heterosexual, but
Hmm.
like any of that. I don't want any of
Right.
that. I was sexualized as a kid. I don't want any of that there. I
Hmm.
want innocence to remain. I want
Hmm.
to go back to basics. And I love what you're saying about school and where is it going, because I'm
Hmm.
seeing that parents are wanting to bring them home to be able to bring and teach these lessons that are not being socially maybe taught, and then they're just being pushed through, right? So I think
Yeah.
it is going to change, and I think it will be more of like
Hmm.
social constructs. But now we're seeing the homeschools are like pods, right? And so they
Yeah.
are getting that social ability to it. I know plenty of moms that are homeschooling and they get to do that
Hmm.
social aspect. So it's really cool sitting back as a not parent, and as a cat mom,
Hmm.
and like watching watching all the
Yeah.
different changes. And like we just talked about it
Yeah.
yesterday, like a lot of parents are wanting to be a part of their kids learning now, and whether
Mhm.
that was brought on because they don't like the ideology taught, or the lack of funding, or whatever it is. I think it's beautiful to
Mhm.
see parents are jumping in, because I think that they're the best teachers, right? And so like all
Mhm.
these parents coming together, teaching one day a week, and like having that, I think that's
Yeah.
so cool, because I got out of school and like I didn't know anything about budgets, or
Nothing.
buying groceries, or taxes, or
Yeah.
debt, or any of that. And I just felt like we were thrown into adult life, and none of that was taught. And it,
Mhm.
it's a little bit nerve-wracking, a little bit, thinking that nobody gets challenged now in school. It's like, okay, you were
Mhm.
wrong. And it's like, oh, we can't say that. We can't say you were
Yeah.
wrong. Like, oh, you maybe didn't get it right, but that's okay. Here's a trophy. Go on to the next grade. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
so that kid goes out to school and he comes to my
Mhm.
work, and now he's feeling like he needs to be paid more because he just exists. And it's like,
Right.
what? Not he, all of them, whatever. But it's
Yeah. Yeah.
you can see the change in the schooling now reflected in the workforce a little bit.
Yeah.
And then oh, they're on CERB for a year and they didn't have to work, and now they're having
Yeah.
to pay it back.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm sure you're the same, but like when you have those moments of struggle and when you meet someone who's totally different, it's frustrating at first, but you always remember how you navigated that difficult challenge. And if you remove
Totally.
challenges from life, it's like, how can you deal with the inevitable dragon, right? The
Mhm.
dragon's gonna like,
He's there.
yeah, it's there, right? Like it's a
You can
fire
avoid
breathing
it.
dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can
And
avoid
so
it, but that's the point of life. Like, what's the point of life?
yes,
Like, for everything just to be like, and I guess that just depends on what you think spiritually or religiously your purpose is
right.
here on earth, right? Some people think, and everyone has a right to, you born, you live your life, you're dead, that's it. Some people
Yeah.
believe you come back and you have all these lessons, and so I think it just really
Hmm.
truly depends there on what you believe in. Therefore, will be how you act in life and see those big steps. For me, it's like now I have an
Yeah.
understanding maybe that I wanted to go through all these hard things. These are the lessons I wanted my soul to learn so I could
Hmm.
evolve in another time dimension, or whatever the fuck is the truth out there. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and
Of
so when you
course.
see it,
Yeah.
when you see
Yeah.
it for that, you're like, okay, I got to go
Yeah.
through this. And then, like you said,
Hmm.
like one time, I just do a quick sidebar here. So
Yeah. Of course.
I used to teach jumping fitness. So I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like your own
Oh.
trampoline and you jump on it for cardio. So it's like 45-minute
Nice.
class of like hardcore jumping on a trampoline to music, to the beat of music.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Wow.
Obviously high energy person. I'm pretty good at cardio classes. And
Nice.
I get real anxious about performance. I have a performance anxiety all the time. It's what fuels me to be
Hmm.
a creator. And so I would just get nervous, and my stomach was like really off this one day. And I'm like, okay, this is a little much, but you're just nervous. It's fine. You're going to have a great class. Like, kill it. And I jumped the whole
Mhm.
time with like barf right here. I had food
Oh,
poisoning.
wow.
I had food poisoning and I jumped the whole time after taking pre workout with it just sitting here. And I got to the end of it and I just
Wow.
hurled. And
Wow.
now, anytime that
Yeah.
anything is hard in my life, I was like, girl, you jumped with food poisoning. You can get through
Yeah.
anything, you know? Like, and that's
Yes.
such a small moment, but it was really just like a
No, but it's so
physical moment
important.
of like,
Yeah.
I'm showing up. I This class came.
Yeah.
There's like 15 people in front of me ready to have a good workout. Like, I've got this. Like, fuck you, anxiety. I'm doing
Mhm.
this. And the whole time I was like sick for the rest of the night. I was like, oh no, okay, that was, but anytime I'm like, any
Mhm.
nerves that I have, I'm like, you can make through it because you went through food poisoning at your most nervous thing to do. So, like you
Mhm.
said, what's the point of life
Definitely.
if you don't have these hard things? And I think we've gotten to a
Mhm.
place where we're trying to hover too much on people not having hard times and feelings.
Oh my goodness. That is very interesting that you experienced that. I remember reading something, and I'll try to find it for you to put in the show notes if people are interested. But like, I remember reading that if a woman is pregnant and has cancer, the
Mhm.
cancer goes into remission to protect the child. Like
Whoa.
it's just some wild evolutionary thing,
Thing. Yeah.
and it protects the child and the mother, and like it just, until the child
Baby
comes to
leaves.
term. And so that's really fascinating that our bodies operate that way, and it's very
Yeah.
similar to like what you just described. I mean, obviously not the same,
Yeah.
um
Something came
but
out
it's
at
a
the end of it and it was uncomfortable. So, same end game there, just different. Probably a little bit more beautiful for a mom, but yeah, like same idea. Yes.
Something came out of the
Yeah,
body at the end,
yeah.
yeah.
Something came out. I was very like tired. Same. But it is those
Okay.
moments in life though, right? That you have to like
Yeah,
be like, okay, that was shit. Like, I've been
that
divorced.
was
It wasn't a terrible divorce. Like as
mhm,
bad as that sounds, when I listen to other people's divorces, it's like, hallelujah,
mhm.
thank you, Steve, for not being a psychopath. Like, thank you for having an
Uh-huh.
amicable divorce. But like you
Nice.
have to go through stuff. And I
Yes.
think parents do a really good job at wanting to make sure that they take care of their kids and make it a fluffy life, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's almost like a little too much because you have to go through the hard. So it's like, I love the parents that are like, I'm going to walk my kid through this, teach them how
Yeah.
to emotionally regulate through this because life isn't fair.
Yep.
Like it was just, I think it's so cool watching our friends like parent in the different styles. And like, again, being a cat mom, I just sit back and like judging you all. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Observing, right?
Observing,
But
yes.
it's very important because that's how the next generation is coming up. And we don't want a generation that you can't ask questions, that these
Yeah.
people are so triggered the minute you say something out of line, just by accident, like
Yeah.
I will 100%, if you tell me what your pronouns are, I will do 100% my best to respect them. I am
Mhm.
French immersion. I am going to mess up in English as it
Mhm.
is, just by
Sure.
proxy of that, right? Like, but I don't mean it with malintent, right? As long as you can have the
Yeah.
grace of that, right? But we're having a society that's
Mhm.
not giving grace to people that are trying to be gracious. And I think we need to like
Mhm.
call that out too as well and be like, again, your feelings are important,
Yeah.
but let's talk about those and so that they're not leading your life. And I'm sure you see that in your comment
Correct.
section.
Oh my god, yeah, all the time, every day. Every day someone I messed someone's life up or someone's day up.
Yeah, you're like,
Uh,
King, sure. Please don't
yeah,
be that
someone called me
invested. Like, please
yeah,
don't be that
yeah.
invested. Like, love me less. Love
Exactly.
me less.
Right. Yeah. I hope I am not the pinnacle of your day. Like I really do. I hope this is just something you just found. You
And
scroll through it. Like,
it just triggered.
you
You just
know,
got to get it out. Like, hope
you
this
got to
helped
get
you
it out.
heal. Like, fine.
Yeah.
I'll be
Yeah.
that bored for
Exactly.
you. But can we be done after this? Can you move on?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. Please, like for the both of us sake.
yeah.
But it's very similar. So, I grew up outside Toronto here in a small suburb called Scarborough, and
Okay, cool.
everybody was from somewhere else. So everybody
Mhm.
was like from a totally different part of the world. And so,
That's cool.
elementary school, high school, there were no white people. I mean, there were a couple white people, but it
Yeah.
was not at all
A white community.
homogenous. It was very like, yeah, it was very diverse. And so I didn't learn about diversity and inclusion until I went away for
From
school in Ottawa, where it was very white.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is what. And so I was always interested when people would tell me, I value diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's
Yeah.
just how we live our lives. Like,
Yes.
everybody's from somewhere else. We don't
What
even
are you
think
talking
about
about?
it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start realizing like, wow, there are people from communities where
Mhm.
they've never talked to someone who's brown skinned or
Hmm.
someone who's indigenous or someone
Yep.
who's, they've never had that
Seen that. Yep.
experience.
Yep. Yep. That's
And
so
so
true.
for them,
Sorry, Quinn.
they need to talk, they have to just constantly mention that they're like, they fully accept you for who you are. And I'm like, just treat me like a human being and we're
Yes,
fine.
absolutely. And I think that's a great thing that I actually like is something that I think is a great for us to discuss too, because like, for
Mhm.
example, for myself as clearly white and see-through now that it's winter, that is one thing that I always struggle because I'm constantly being told that I'm racist. But like, yeah, if you
Hmm.
looked at me, for sure, yeah, I'm white. But I do have, Jewish background. I do have indigenous
Right.
background, like most of us
Yeah.
at this point do, right? And it's,
Hmm.
it always worries me because I always feel like I'm always like, can I act like my boss? He's Fijian. And I remember like wanting to ask him, like, so like, why are you brown? Not in a mean way. Like, I don't mean
Yeah,
that. Like,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
afraid to offend someone because I don't mean that. I'm generally
Sure.
curious, right? And so
Yeah,
obviously I'm not like that. But I grew up with,
yeah, yeah.
Vancouver Island was very diverse. Like, I would
Right.
say that I never ran into somebody from Newfoundland. And the first time I
Yeah.
did in Alberta, I was like, what the fuck? Did you just say like you're Canadian? Like, to me that was more shocking than,
Uh,
but there wasn't very many, let's say, black people in Port Alberni. It
yeah,
wasn't, but there was tons of like, different cultures, Asian, like
yeah,
East
yeah,
Indians, all of that, like
yeah.
Native, like all of them. So we did
Hmm.
grow up with that. And so again, like you said, when people are like, oh, diversity, or that you're racist, and I'm like,
Yeah.
how? Okay. And then I'm like starting evaluating everything, and it's like, is my curiosity what makes me racist? Is it like, is it the words that I'm saying? Like, please tell me,
Yeah.
because that is not who I am as a person. And then so it's like you
No.
shy away from even asking
Hmm.
questions because you're afraid to offend someone. And I just
Yeah.
think it's such a shitty thing, because that curiosity, I think, is what's beautiful and what makes Canada Canada, that we do have
Yeah.
so many different cultures that are here. I want to know about it. Like, you got some good
Hmm.
food, share it with me. Like, like you
It's
have some, like,
spicy. It's
yeah,
really spicy.
right, exactly. And maybe I won't like it. That doesn't mean that I'm racist. It means I have a
Right.
bland palate, okay? Like, fuck. It's
Yeah.
not, and it's so insane that people say that, because it creates
Yeah.
division that doesn't need to be there. It puts
Yes.
scarcity in my mind that I know I'm not those things. But then I'm like,
Right.
how do I navigate asking these questions? Like, and
Yes.
then when my boss said, oh, I'm Fijian, I'm like, that is so fucking cool. Tell me more about it. Like, like, because it's cool,
Yeah.
because I want to know. And
It
I
is.
will say the cannabis industry is the industry that brings people from all walks of life, from
Yeah.
hippie growers, from like all walks of life, to
Hmm.
people that like literally all over the world. Like, my VP is from South
Hmm.
Africa. Like I said, my boss is he's Fijian. We've got
Hmm.
people from Europe that barely speak English, and it's so
Ah.
cool because it's so diverse, and people all come
Yeah.
together, and we're just one big family, and we learn from each other. So I just really struggle
Hmm.
when people say like, oh, all white people are racist, and I'm like, where? Tell
Jeez.
me where, when, what did I do that? Please, like,
Yeah.
and then it's like, I
Yeah.
want to talk about topics, but it's like, am I too white to talk about that topic? I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, and it makes me really sad, because that's not where a lot of people's hearts are. There.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's not. There absolutely is. Hundo
Yeah.
P. But two truths can
100%.
exist at the same time. There could be white people that are not at all, and white people that are. I don't think it's
Yeah.
like a race
Yeah.
thing. There
Yeah.
was a big conversation I was watching recently, because again, I'm trying to like figure out where I'm hurting people by being white. And it was like, white people can't talk about certain topics. And so I'm just listening, and
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, going back through all my fucking episodes. I was like, did I ever talk about this? Like, and it's not because I'm
Uh,
worried about being canceled. It's because I don't want to
no.
hurt anybody, right? Like, I do want to have
Yeah.
honest conversations, and it's just so
Yeah.
shitty.
Yeah.
So thanks
Yeah,
for
this could be
listening
this
to
could be
that.
like I could be your honest face because I
Yes,
am
thank
totally
you.
okay. I am
Like,
totally okay answering all the questions because I can
well,
imagine, like people. This one person messaged me. They're like, "I did not expect that accent from your face," and I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, you. I'm like, how am I supposed to speak? I grew up in Toronto. Like, it's so
oh,
crazy.
it's
Like,
like, and
you know
two,
what I
it's
mean?
like, and then it's like, it's fair to know, like, of course people are raised here in different colors too, but it's
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of people that aren't from here, right? So you're always like,
Right. Yes, that's
so
so
where are you
true.
from? Born and
So,
raised there? Like, that's
let's
a good
hear
one for
that
me.
voice.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's the
You're
fun
like,
part about us. Like, we were audio for the first couple years before
right.
Anchor offered the video.
Oh,
And I
yes,
don't
yes.
know if Anchor offered that. Did you use Anchor at all?
I did when I first started, and then I moved over to Buzzsprout.
Oh, okay. So we've been Anchor
Yeah,
from day one, and then all of a sudden one day it was
nice.
like, you can do video, and I was like, ooh,
Oh, that's
are we
amazing.
ready to put our faces to our voices? Because it's
Yeah.
so much easier. You look at like, I like to spend my
Mhm.
time when I do a lot of Excel work, right? Being inventory.
Yeah.
So I like to have stuff in the background that I don't need to focus. So my weird like listen to is beauty drama channels on YouTube. I don't give a shit about
Nice.
the beauty community. I don't care about James Charles or Jeffree Star or
Yeah,
Michaela Noguera, but I love their
yeah,
drama and I don't have to
yeah.
listen to it. So just like be in the background.
Nice.
Um, but I don't even know where I was going with that.
No, it's okay, that's amazing.
I think for yeah,
Oh,
for me, I just like love listening to those types of things. But at the same time,
yeah.
it was just like like you said, there was no common ground podcast about Canada. What's going on, Canada? Where are we with
Mhm.
Canadians? Like, um,
Yeah.
why can't we talk about certain things? So I wanted to ask you two things.
Mhm.
One, what is the most controversial topic that you've ever spoken about, and have you ever not released an episode due to
Yeah,
maybe it
those are
being
good questions.
controversial?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it's so interesting that you ask those questions because there have been many where I've lost friends, and I don't know if you have as well, but I've lost
Oh yeah.
friends, definitely family members who just like kind of look at me a bit. What are you really talking about? What's your real opinion? You know, um, but I would say that for sure I lost a lot. The most amount of friends I lost was when I was talking to pro-life groups about abortion. Um, People were just like so
So
furious that I did
upset.
that.
Yep.
So I would say that perhaps, and it told me that again, maybe it's the way I was covering it, maybe it was
Mhm.
the people I was having on, because the groups I had on had very strong opinion and very condemning of the
Yeah.
pro-choice movement.
Yeah.
But conversely, some of the pro-choice groups I interviewed felt similarly to the what they considered anti-choice group. They did not call them pro-life. It was very
Yeah.
anti-choice. So
All
it
these
was just
labels.
this like right. It was like that Spider-Man meme, right? It's
Yeah.
like you, no, 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 you. Like so, I thought to myself that perhaps is. And then there was another one where I did gun control, and I talked to the
Mm.
Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights,
Mhm.
and
Cool.
that lost me a whole group of friends too. And they said, how could you talk to this like alt-right gun nut lobby? And I'm like, if you think that what that group is about, that's your opinion. But guess what? There are Canadians who value gun rights,
Yes.
and they need to be heard. And if that's the group that is representing them because they have the biggest platform, then
Yes.
that's the group. It doesn't. I'm not going to not talk to them.
Yes.
So I would say those are perhaps
Do
some.
top.
Yeah, I will say though that I've never not released an episode.
Nice. Good for you.
Thanks, because I feel like at the end of the day, if I get one listen or if I get like 5,000, at the end of the
Mhm.
day, it's like I need to confront my own internal dragon
Mhm.
of why I feel so anxious covering these topics. And is
Mhm.
that a point of society told me, my parents told me I can't talk about these things, et cetera, et cetera? It's like, no, if you don't talk about this, that voice, that spirit inside you is going to be hounding you every
Mhm.
single minute
Yeah.
why you didn't.
Yeah.
And do you want to live with that? Like,
Nope.
no, you don't.
No,
You know
I
what I
don't want to
mean?
listen
You
to
can
that devil in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
have to let that out, and
Yeah.
you can't. We're not put on this earth to live a mediocre life. We have to
Mm-mm.
live life to the absolute fullest, and that means channeling the spirit inside of us to find
Totally.
those paths. Yeah.
And I think no matter what religion or culture or spirituality you look at, we can all say that
Mhm.
everyone there has a message to, whether that's God speaking to you
Correct.
and you're speaking through God, or if that's a download
Yeah.
through a channel of,
Right.
spirit talking to you, any different level, they all kind of come to the same thing. And the more I
Hmm.
think we have in touch with ourselves, the more we're listening internally, which blows my mind.
Hmm.
Some people don't have internal dialogue. That's a whole other conversation. Um,
Yeah.
right, like once you start
Yeah.
really channeling those things and having those it's almost like, is that's your purpose when you are getting those messages, because whether they're for, like you said, one person or 5,000, it's for that one person,
Hmm.
whether that one person
Right.
gets it, whether that one person feels validated, heard, like,
Hmm.
or a seed is planted and you've pissed someone off. That one's my favorite, is when you piss someone
Yeah.
off and then they're like, I'm gonna go research this, and then you hear fuck all after that and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Like those little
Yeah.
seeds, like to me, those things that are coming in, those questions, those are seeds that you're planting in people's brains that maybe right now they're on their journey, they're not ready to hear that.
Yeah.
That's
They're
not
not
a you
ready. Yeah.
problem, but maybe they will, and they'll come back and be like, Christopher talked about this. I was pissed off. And now he's right. And now I'm going to go back and listen because I'm ready to listen and receive that
Yeah.
message. Right. And I think
Hmm.
we hear that through there's different channels, there's priests, there's light workers, there, whichever way you look at it, there's always people that are delivering messages of what's inside of them. And I think if we
Mhm.
hold them back when we're people that feel like we can do that, we're doing a disservice to
Mhm.
ourselves and
Yes.
to the people inside our heads and to the people outside in the world.
Yeah,
I've had one
100%.
episode, one episode I did not release,
Mm.
and that was due to the guest not wanting it to be released because
Wow.
she was in a gag order with a plastic surgeon, and she was
Oh, wow.
afraid that even though we had complete anonymity in that episode, if she would have been found that it was her, she would have been
Mhm.
lost her house and $250,000.
Oh,
So
wow.
she was like, I really want to get my story out. This is very healing for me. But at the same time, if some weird ass karmic way that this comes
Mhm.
back and I lose my house, like I'm already like, that's it for me. So I was
Mhm.
like, out of respect to you, I will not ever release it. But I'm also in the same, like,
Yeah.
what I thought at season one about maybe this topic is maybe not what I feel now. And even if it is, why do I
Mhm.
have to be hated for that or worry about that? I'm a growing, evolving
Yeah.
individual and I don't always get it right.
Yes. None of us
Sorry.
do, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're
Sorry.
human.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
not perfect. I've never
Yeah.
claimed to be. I always say I don't know shit about fuck, but I think this is weird. Like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like that's what my podcast is people like
Uh,
learning me, like consuming this information and trying to decipher what the fuck it means and putting it out there to be
oh
like,
my gosh.
what do you guys
Yeah,
think this is? Like, like there's
yeah.
so many, and I'm sure you've seen this too, where like bills, like someone will take a bill and they're like, Canada is
Mhm.
shutting down supplements and natural supplements. They're shut down. We can never get them again.
Mhm.
When I read it, it was like, we want the side effects to be documented so that
Yeah.
we can get collections of like these natural products and what they do. That's what I took from it. And I was like, but
Mhm.
everyone circulated that it was like shut down. You're never going to be able to buy them. It was going to be like meth. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like you
Is
have to
that
really,
really?
it's that's not quite what it is, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know,
Yeah.
and this is a question I actually have for you.
Yeah.
Have you noticed anything yet with the bill, was it C-18 for the
Yeah.
podcasting regulation? Have you seen any changes on your side? Like, is
It's
that
a
on
good
your radar?
question. I yeah, it's so wild. When it came to Bill C-18, I haven't noticed any major changes just yet because right now I do think it's just a registration. So
Okay.
they just want to know the names of individuals and the podcasts that they have. Um, I think what will really be the test is in the years to come. Let's say if and when Polyev becomes prime minister,
Mhm.
will C-18 be ever revisited? And to me,
Enforced.
that's the real test. Yeah, because I
Yep.
would like to hold whomever's prime minister in the next 3 to 4 years account to Bill C-18 because
Please.
that to me is a direct attack, can be a direct attack potentially
Mhm.
on civil society. The one thing that can hold government to account is civil society. And so
Mhm.
I personally have these opinions about, Freedom Convoy was the government testing the waters to see how far they could go with a movement.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
they went pretty far. And,
They went pretty
the
far.
right? Like, I mean, like, if you think about it, they took a hacked list off Reddit of
Yeah.
donors of the Freedom
Yes.
Convoy and froze their
Went
bank
with
accounts.
it. I
How
went
is
with
that
it.
possible? Yeah,
This
like
we'll
in
go with
what
it.
world we can't build a subway to save our life
No.
without like 100 people saying, "Not in my backyard." No, 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 no. But to like take a hacked list of Christopher took like $10 and freeze his bank account. He's not paying
Fuck
his
him.
mortgage.
He's a
Fuck him.
Nazi.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Like what?
what? Like,
No.
how did that happen? Who called Scotiabank and was like, freeze his bank account
Do
right now? Like,
this.
build a subway. How about that? How about we focus
How
on that?
about that? Yeah, like so many other things. Like,
Like,
let's deal with the homelessness
yeah,
problem. Let's deal with all of this. And
exactly.
one topic we
Right.
talked about, because we've decided this last season to do a segment called Keeping Up with Canada instead of like Keeping Up with the Kardashians, like kind of like a play on of
Nice.
like what is
I like
going
that.
on, kind of like in our,
Yeah.
not, and not a high level. I'm just a basic stoner. I just read shit on the internet and like just talk about it. But I think that that's all I want to be. I don't want to be a
Yeah.
political commentator. I don't want to be
Hmm.
claim to be any expert. I'm just a regulated chick that's like, what?
Nice.
This doesn't make
I love
sense.
that.
Right? Like, well, I just
Yeah, I
don't
love
claim
that.
to be any expert, but
No,
we
that's
just have
great. We need more of that.
right, like why can't I have an opinion? Why do I have to be,
Yeah.
I'm a person that's successful without any education. I graduated grade 12 and I've been able
Nice.
to be at office manager in the oil field. I have now brought myself
Wow.
into a position that I don't even know if there's another one of me in Canada. I don't want to say that that's arrogant, but I don't know many people
Mhm.
that do what I job and can't do what it do in the cannabis industry. I'm very like niched
Wow.
into that, but I never went to school for the things that I did. But there was just
Amazing.
this huge arrogance over the last couple of years where it's like, you don't have education, so you can't talk. I'm still a fucking human with experiences. Like,
No, you're not. No, you're
yeah,
not.
I'm like,
It's like,
God
okay.
damn it, I'm not educated. I'm not like I'm white. I'm like, there's so many things that are
Oh
wrong with
yeah.
me.
I
Like
forgot you're white.
I
Oh my
forgot, I
god.
know.
You
I'm
have an
like,
opinion and you're white? Oh my
just
god. How dare
end
you?
me now, cancel me now, but it's just like I love when people are able to come to the
Oh,
table and just be like, your opinion matters, and I just
yes.
I really love that you do that. Even if it's people that oppose you, I
Thanks.
notice in the comments, you're just like,
Oh,
you're the first person to be like, yo, you're right, maybe that didn't come out that way and this is what I meant. And I just like thank you for leading an example with that, because we don't need to
thank you.
be assholes. Like we have to
Yeah.
take it to like I don't know if you ever watch a girl named Swoop, but she always talks about
Yeah.
taking things to Petty University. Like, and I get that. I'm
Yes.
like, yes, girl, from
Yes.
time to time you have to go there. But I want
Yeah.
to be a part of the Canadians that are speaking on my very small platform that try and bridge us all together. Try to show
Yeah.
that like most of the time when we have social justice movements, we're at the same spot. We all feel the same. We're just communicating it and wording it a little bit different. Like I posted a
Correct.
black square for Black Lives Matter because I generally am like, you do matter. And I want, like, as a
Yeah.
white woman, I want to say you do matter. And I'm sorry
Yeah.
for everything. And I got
Yeah.
ripped apart. And I was like, now I don't know what to
Yeah.
do. Right. Like now I'm
Yeah.
worried because, like, again, like there's so many topics that people are afraid to talk about because they're not experts.
Mhm.
They're not. And it's like, but
Yeah.
I want to know what other people are thinking so that we can get those conversations out so that we don't develop
Mhm.
narratives and bias and false
Mhm.
information because people are too afraid to talk about it, right? Like
Correct.
you're
Yeah.
very brave. I like the wars are just stuff I'm not going to talk about again. I'm a stoner. I don't
Yeah.
get into those things. I'll talk about like the chemtrails
Yeah.
going back and forth and like what's in our food
Yeah.
and like,
I'd love to know more about
yeah,
that
I
for
have
sure.
questions. I have so many questions, but it's like
Yeah.
I want to come to the place that you could just have an experience and opinion
Mhm.
and just talk about it. And that's what I love about podcasting. And that's what getting to is like, is that your favorite part about podcasting, is just being able to be yourself and lay it out there and just put like your mind out digitally in time.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
scary
my
sometimes.
gosh. It is.
Shit,
Yeah,
I said that.
definitely.
And if I remove that episode, then that's just going to look weird in the numbers. So I guess I'm
Yeah, yeah,
sticking
yeah.
with
Like
it.
174 to
Yeah.
201. What
I
happened there for like 20 episodes? You
yeah,
just
I
didn't
just
release
blacked
those?
out. Yeah.
Blacked out. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I think it also, and I was talking to my cousin about this the other night. I said, I think this journey also is a very personal journey because, I've struggled, and this is very personal, but I've always struggled with relationships and putting myself out there with girls. And now after doing these podcasts, I'm over like 200 now. I'm like, I now think if I'm blessed to be in a relationship with a girl, I'd be like asking the most deepest questions
Yeah.
all the time because I'd be like, we need to communicate. Like,
Yes.
I need to know.
Number one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I have some awkward questions. Like, how
Yeah.
can I be better for you? How can I be a better boyfriend?
Yes.
Like, I realize there's a lot of things about me I need to work on. And so
Cool.
I'm not perfect and I don't ever pretend to be, but what are the things that you wish, the small things that I could do, and like,
Yeah.
let me, and then by the way, here are some things you can work on too,
Yeah.
so like, I
Yes.
feel like,
Give and take. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, to me, it's like this fearlessness. And my cousin is really struggling with having these very open conversations with his partner. And I said,
Hmm.
there's merit in just putting it out there. You don't have to do it in a confrontational way, but
No.
you're watching TV, you're having like a drink with your partner, just be like, hey, like, what were your thoughts about, how you know, talked the other night? I noticed you were a little bit short or whatever the
Mm.
case is. It's like,
Mhm.
there's ways in which you can bring up these conversations and it makes you a better person, partner, etc. to the other person
Yeah,
as
and
well.
podcasting
So,
helps you do that so well because you're listening
yeah.
to respond, not listening to like just like answer, right? Like you
Yes.
have to take that in. And I actually want to go back to that because you said something very interesting before, where there's people
Mhm.
coming to you saying they can't speak to their spouses, and we had
Yeah.
this talk the other day where it's all good if you want to get together and get married and have a kid right away. But what I'm
Sure.
finding is that people aren't having those because it's not sexy to, those big conversations that you should be having before you get into a marriage and have children, like,
Mm.
are we going to vaccinate our children? How do we feel
Yes.
about schooling and homeschooling? If this gender
Mhm.
ideology comes up in school, how do you feel? And but when you're first dating,
Mhm.
like, you don't want to jump in and be like, so okay, how do you feel about food dyes and red 40, and how do you feel about Tylenol? Because like, I have a big problem with Tylenol and Western medicine, and like, but you don't want to talk
Yeah,
about that
yeah.
in the dating because it's so
Sure.
hard right now. I'm sure, like, I
Yeah.
don't know, I've been,
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
relationship for 7 years and married before that.
yeah.
So like, but from what I'm
Yeah, yeah,
hearing
yeah.
from my friends, and then people get in relationships and it's like less and it's fine. And then all of a sudden, because everyone else is having kids and getting married, they do it really quickly. And then now all of a sudden they're having a baby. And now they're starting to see like, oh, we didn't have these big conversations. Like, who's going to be
Yeah.
like, does mom go back to work? Can we financially afford that? Like, it's really crazy. And then all of a sudden now you get these relationships where people are just living in their lives and they're being social on
Oh,
their phones, but they're not having these conversations. And I think it's really
yeah.
important to say, like, it's very important to be able to be safe to say something and to be able to receive it. I noticed that was
Yes.
something in my relationship, that I was very good at telling him how I felt, but I was
Mhm.
not living an open space for him to tell me how he felt. And I would be reactive
Mhm.
anytime he criticized me because my
Mm.
parents were all over me all the time and were trying to make me quote unquote perfect and controlled
Mm.
everything. So the minute he tried to like control, I'd snap at him, not that it's his, and then I had to have that awareness being like,
Mm.
shit, or like, you're doing
Mhm.
something wrong. Did I create a space that you felt safe to come and tell me? Or was I
Mhm.
so hostile that if you were to say, like, oh, I did this, I'd be like, fuck you and explode. Right. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's not a lot of self responsibility and accountability in the world these days. And that is a very big
Yeah.
place we need to focus as a collective for our friends,
Mhm.
our coworkers, our spouses, because we're just going around pointing fingers, but we're not being like, where did I maybe go wrong there? Where could, like you said, where could I show up
Yes.
better? Right? Where did I go?
Right.
Can we sit down and talk about this? Like you said, something seems off. Like,
Mhm.
am I okay to ask you? Is this a good time to talk about it?
Yeah.
You know, and
100%.
and men
Yeah.
have a really funny way of like, and it's cool because that's your nature and I love it, of
Yeah.
fixing
Yeah.
everything, right? So then
Yeah. Oh,
then
yeah.
then Grant will be like, immediately like throwing things out to fix it. I turn around, I'm like, I'm not fucking asking you to fix it. Like,
Just listen to
stop.
me,
Just
damn
listen.
it.
And so
Yeah.
it would then create these arguments. And so
Yeah.
we got to the point where he was like, hey, how do we do this? And I'm like, so in these moments when I'm not giving you clear signals of what I need from you, stop. What do you need? Do you need advice?
Yeah.
Do you need a hug? Are you venting? What is it that you need from me? And then I'm like, right, you're trying to support me and I'm being crazy and chaotic right now and I'm not giving you good signals of what I want. So right now,
Mhm.
shut up and listen. And when I'm done,
Mhm.
it's over. I just need to get it out. Or please help me figure this out. I don't
Yeah.
know what to do, where it's like, but if I just got mad at him and we exploded, it was like he didn't care and I don't care. And
Mhm.
that is so far from the truth, right? Like,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's just for everyone too. Again, these social justice movements, they all need to be there. They all have validity. Everyone has
They do.
feelings. They need to be
Yeah.
talked about. But we need to take some emotion out of that and come together, right? And I just feel like
Correct.
I have
Yeah.
been one of those people. I get it. I emotionally
Yeah.
diarrheaed on a lot of people and vomited in their DMs and
Sure.
their comments. I've been there. And then you realize that doesn't get us anywhere at
Yeah.
all, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if
Correct.
you've
And I
noticed
think
that.
it's no, no, it's all good because I think the other thing is people are terrified to disagree with their partner because somehow they
Mhm.
think that if they disagree with their partner, that
It's done.
means what? Like it's done, the relationship's over, no sex, no like
Yep.
intimacy. It's
Yep.
like
No
I
future.
think maybe I'm the only guy out there who thinks this way, but I think if I disagree with my partner, that actually is weirdly attractive. Like,
Yeah, that they have their
like
own
whoa,
personality. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
I'm here to learn, and I'm here to
Yeah.
like sit at
Why
the
do you
sit
think
at the.
that?
I think it's because
No, like, I mean, like in the conversation, like, like,
yeah, like
oh,
why
like,
do you
why do
think
you
that?
think that? Let's have a conversation instead of
Yeah,
like, we align in everything. So what are we
every
really
way.
conversing
Yeah.
about, right? Like, which is nice, but you
Yeah.
have to have like,
Yes.
Grant, we argue all the time about chemtrails. All the time. It is like,
Right.
it's a joke in between, but
Yeah.
it's like a joke, right? We don't get mad at each other.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you don't have to
Yeah.
believe in this spiritual hippy dippy thing that I am. I
Yeah.
respect that you were raised Christian and that you believe in God and that you believe we're done after
Right.
this. I don't.
Right.
And I respect that though. But here's why. And then we'll have conversations. And he was like,
Yeah.
no, that does like, that kind of makes sense. And then we can have this beautiful
Mhm.
conversation and still respect. Like, we go to his mom, she
Exactly.
prays, I pray. Like, I believe in God. That's just not who I pray
Mhm.
to, but I believe and I respect
Right.
that. And I'm always going to be kind. And I just think
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful life when you're open to that, right? Like, Like, yeah, I said, like, teach me the
100%.
things about like what you learned, your culture. Like, I don't know what I could teach you
Mhm.
about white French kids, but we watched a pineapple all the time. His name was Anana. It was real weird. We got called French fries our whole life. You know, you hated your whole, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
has
yeah.
value, and I'm so tired of the society and media
Yeah,
saying some people have value at this time, some people have value at others. Like we all
yeah.
do, and we all have things to say. And I feel like you probably understand that being a podcaster and interviewing, everyone's got a story, and it's all important.
Everyone's got a story, yeah. It's
And
so
you
important, and
learn.
I think and you learn, and I think also it's this weird place that a lot of I hate to say BIPOC 'cause such a terrible acronym. I hate
I
that
know.
acronym with a deep passion, because there's 2 groups that experience the most hate
Mhm.
crimes according to, statistics, and those are Jewish and Muslim communities, and they're not represented in that acronym. And I don't
No.
care who tells me, it's just
Interesting.
so it just doesn't make sense to me that the Jewish community and the Muslim community are not represented in that acronym, and I wonder sometimes if like that's purposeful, but separate
That
podcast for
is.
another day.
Oh man, it sounds like we're just gonna have to
Yeah.
have repeats. I'm just gonna have to come on yours. I can't come with like smart politics, but I can come with sassy
Yeah.
humor and like questions.
Even better. That's even
Right?
better.
But it's so true
Uh,
though, right? It's like, what are you
yeah,
standing for? All these causes, it's not saying that they don't have merit. Just like cults, man, they all start with a
yeah,
good plot. It's like better life, what,
yeah,
like bringing harmony, bringing away from
yeah,
establishment. And then there's always one crazy motherfucker with an ego that Charles
yeah.
Manson's it, and you're like, or what's that last guy? Have you seen that twin flame cult?
No. Oh, everyone
Oh,
keeps telling me about this. It's on Netflix,
so
right?
you, yes, and
Oh,
Amazon
I
Prime.
got it.
Watch both of them,
Okay.
guys. If you are, watch both of them because they're the same, but they're different people. And
Oh, wow.
what was really, I don't want to ruin it for you. You'll be kind of
Okay.
blown away because there is like it kind of goes in a whole other sphere when it comes to feminine and masculine energy, and you can see how
Mm,
manipulative they can be and
mm,
how and vulnerable people are. And I'm the first person to say I'm a perfect candidate for a cult. 100%. I got dragged into
mhm.
3 MLMs. I am a firm believer
Oh,
that there's
wow.
got to be something better, right? And I just
Yeah.
like my love language is words of affirmation. So like at that vulnerable
Mhm.
time in my life, I can totally like be manipulated, and I feel very proud of myself that I haven't fallen to that with my podcast where it's like this is how I
Wow.
feel and maybe I'll grow, but I'm not going to bend to
Mhm.
what is
Yeah.
popular. I'm going to share what I actually feel. Is that
Mhm.
something that you would say has brought you success in your podcasting, is being authentic to how you truly feel, whether it's popular or not?
Yeah, and the confusing part for me is figuring out after you talk to all these people about these big topics what you thought initially and what you thought think after. And that's
Yes.
like, wow, I really didn't have a strong opinion then because I wasn't able to fully defend it to the extent
Yes.
that some of these people can really defend their opinions. And I remember I did a mini series I did a series on sex work, and I interviewed all these sex workers, which was like so interesting.
Mhm.
But then right after that, I did a mini series on capital punishment in the United States, and there was this prosecutor or lawyer, sorry, in South Carolina, and she said, it's not capital punishment in South Carolina that's the issue. The issue is, um, as an 18-year-old, you can get charged, and I forget the phrase, but it's like you can get charged, life without parole at 18. And that means that if let's say you and I are friends and you kill someone and I see you kill someone, I can be charged at 18 for life without parole for witnessing a murder. So you'll get the death penalty. I'll get life without parole. So I'll live until my 80s in prison. And that's
Yep.
what's happening in South Carolina. It's like,
Wow.
that is like, let's not
That's
even talk about capital
insane.
punishment. Yeah, that
Yep.
right there is an insane policy. And it's like,
Yep.
they've done referendums in South Carolina and most people are agreeing with it. So it's like, that's really wild.
That is
And
very wild.
it's even for minors. So if you're 15 or 16 and you witness it, and think of it like, we've been in situations where you're wrong person, wrong place, wrong time, and you're
Totally.
with the wrong set of friends, and
Yep.
they did
All been
something
there.
like whatever, and you're
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, how did I end up here? I'm so glad I ended up home. So
Yep.
you just think of how many young people in South Carolina that they're
Get
being
affected.
denied that opportunity. Right. And so there's this big movement to get that rid of that policy. So to me, it's like these nuances are so important to our discourse. And it's like,
Mhm.
as podcasters, how much our energy is best spent bringing that out and
Mhm.
letting more people into the complexity. And hey,
Yes.
by the way think about that before you could even think of
Yes.
lethal injection? Like
Yep.
that's really happening right now.
Yep.
Like can you imagine getting life without parole at
No,
16 years old?
no,
Like,
I don't think I'd
my
want to continue
goodness.
living, like it just
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
and I
All
agree,
those moments gone.
and I believe those nuance and those conversations totally have to happen even though they're uncomfortable. And when we talk about it,
Mhm.
doesn't mean to say that I have the answer. I don't fucking know the
No,
answer to a lot of stuff, man.
exactly.
I don't know how to solve shit, but we are
Yeah.
smart people. We can all come together
Yes.
and figure it out. I don't need to have the answers to say
Yes. Yeah.
like I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
When Trudeau came to Kelowna, and then he was with the charity Mamas for Mamas, like there was
Yeah.
a good opportunity for something to be asked, and they just talked
Mhm.
about the Barbie movie, and I was just like,
Mm.
there's just some things where
Wow.
it's like I don't love that, but like you had your choice to
Mhm.
do it, and it's like
Yeah.
I respect what they do, don't like what you did, just whatever. um
Yeah.
but it's crazy how there's so many people that went to them and like, I'm going to cancel you because you did that. And it's like,
Yeah.
maybe they didn't want to be political, maybe they didn't want to bring their charity into it. They had a moment where he came there, and I just think it was such a showboat moment for it. It was like he
Mhm.
picked up a box and went from here to there, and that's all he did. And I was like,
Oh,
I have so many
yeah.
questions. Like, what are you doing for the people in
Y
Kelowna? What are you doing for the
yeah.
homeless problem? I don't know if you've seen it here, but
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
outrageous. And I'm not claiming to say that by asking these questions to him that I expect him to know an answer or that I know the answer, but I want to know that that that's a problem. Right. And
Correct.
it's like, I'm
Right.
not saying you need to know the answer. And like we talked about on our last episode that we're just launching next Friday about universal basic
Mhm.
income, it
Mm.
sounds great. It, throwing money at stuff usually fixes stuff, but
Mhm.
where's the actual support in that? Throwing
Yeah.
$1,400 a month to somebody is not doesn't pay for their rent. I know I heard one of your
Right.
episodes was talking about how insane rent is, and I think it was just
Oh,
kind of maybe a
yeah.
form of support that you guys have in Ontario, and how that doesn't even come
Mhm.
close to covering
Oh,
it, right? And so it's like, I'm not saying that that's the answer or not, but I want, like you said, to hold these people accountable. You think that this is going to help? Has it?
mhm.
Did CERB help?
Right.
Did the help that you gave to all these small businesses now that are closing across our country because
Mhm.
they can't afford to pay those loans back from COVID? Like,
Yeah.
these are things that we need to talk about that are uncomfortable, but because there's nuances of being like, people are mad because of homelessness and we can't talk about it. We gotta talk about it. Like, how do we
Yeah.
fix it? How do we fix it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what would be your tips and tricks for any other people that would want to do a podcast, and
Mhm.
to step into that authenticity? What are some things that you kind of do to help block maybe the naysayers that aren't happy with what you've said or who you've brought on? Maybe like, what are your tips and
Mhm.
tricks to do you just sage?
Yeah.
Do you sage your
Of course.
computer?
Yeah, I do sage. Yeah,
You
yeah,
got
yeah,
crystals everywhere.
definitely.
Like,
I love sage. I love
yeah,
incense. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I've got some sage. I burn it all the time.
yeah.
There's definitely a few things, for me it was always a struggle finding like the authenticity and like being
Mhm,
authentic, because sometimes you worry like, okay, like this is what I truly think and this is what the questions I truly want to ask, and yeah, you risk, man, I just, my heart goes out to everyone who's lost family and friends behind this stuff, because it is
mhm.
hard. It is hard
So
for
hard.
some people to come around, and like people have lost partners. I can't
Mhm.
date someone who's conservative or liberal. I can't be with someone, like it's so messed up that that's happening. And so that authentic piece is something that all of us still struggle with, because there
Mhm.
is that reality of life that we all have to interact with. One person, I made a comment on Israel and Palestine, and this person's like, man, I should really find out where you live and see if you like it if I took over your home. I'm like, Jesus Christ, like stuff can get really serious, real. Yeah. Oh, like, oh my God. Like there's some, yeah, there's definitely
People are
that energy out there.
so tough behind a keyboard. Like, that's one thing that I've
Yeah.
noticed is like people will be very in the comments, but like no one comes up to me in my real life and was like, "You're
No.
giving vaccine misinformation," but they have no
Yeah.
problem coming in my DM and saying that. I'm like, "You're so ballsy," and so that's where I started to not care. I think one big
Yeah.
thing for me, it's like, if I and I'm not talking about like, oh yeah, I would love to be rich and live in that person's house. If I don't
Yeah.
respect that person's morals and how they
Yeah.
construct and live their life, then I'm not going to worry about their opinion. Like, that's kind of how
Yeah.
I look at it in the
So
nicest way.
true.
I'll listen to it, I'll take it in, I'll note it for myself,
Yeah.
like, because I'm constantly self-evaluating,
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
thoughts and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and feelings and
Yeah.
awareness, and being like, okay, where
Yeah.
are you wrong here, right? But it's like, to a degree, I'll take it, and that's
Yeah.
great. And I'll learn something new or I'll move on. And people just get
Yeah.
so riled up and get so mad at being like, you have to be this one, or I can't date a vaccinated person, or I can't date an unvaccinated person, or, if you
Yeah.
don't have your name supporting this, or you don't support that, then and it's just like,
Yeah.
guys, this label thing is getting a little wild.
Yeah,
like let's stop using mean words, but also let's stop putting weight on everything everybody says, right? Like just because
exactly.
someone came in your comment section and said you're a racist, like does
Yeah,
that mean that you are? Like
yeah,
you can take a minute and be like, am I showing up the best? Am I doing the
yeah,
right things? For sure. But to
yeah,
go to bed every night then saying that you are when you know you're not,
yeah. Yeah,
like
exactly.
dealing with
It's
authenticity for sure, being like, am I growing in this right way? Am I doing this? But at the same time,
yeah.
you know who you are. You're
You
not
know
the
who
mean
you
things
are.
that people are saying
Yeah,
to you in the comments. It's
exactly.
wild the balls that people have, that what they
Oh,
say or what they do. I was just watching a Netflix documentary about a guy that was swatting people and like swatting news stations and swatting banks, and like
whoa.
he was a gamer and he was like getting off on it and like, oh, like I'll swat your house.
Wow.
And one guy ended up being murdered because one guy,
Wow.
oh, I can't even remember how it really happened, but he gave him his address and was like, I bet you won't swat me, and gave him the wrong address, and some implication happened and someone ended up dead. And now there's this
Wow.
huge like lawsuit going on of like who is responsible for this, because he called the SWAT in, this kid lied to him, he was egging him on, and it's like this whole back and forth. And it's like there's this
Wow.
whole world of online space that our parents, like my mom doesn't know how to
Yeah.
necessarily tell me how to deal with any online hate I might get because they never had that,
Mhm. Yeah,
right? So
they
it's
never
like
had
this
that. They haven't yeah.
whole generation, like we said, we are the last generation to not have that, but we are also the first generation that have to live as adults and regulate
Mhm.
online life. And
Yes.
I feel bad for kids that are growing up with it and seeing this filtered, fake persona out
Mhm.
there. So I think it's super important for podcasters to have authentic voices, freedom of speech, so that the next generation can see all of it. It's not just an echo chamber to whatever fucking government is in
Yeah,
control. I don't want it all conservative
exactly.
either, right? Like there's got to be a
No, no, there
balance.
needs to be balance. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I would say also like, don't worry if you mess up because if you just keep at it and you keep at it every single day and you just think to yourself, okay, like what micro improvements can I make?
Mm-hmm.
And underneath some of the criticism that you get from your comment section, like if people are like what they call dogpiling, like that's one thing when people are literally just hating on you for the sake of hating
Just
on you. Okay,
trolls.
well,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
They're just trolls.
Yeah.
But to be honest, there's a lot of comments where I'm like, I totally see that person's point that
Mm-hmm.
this wasn't clear. This wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
the cuts weren't the best, or the storyline didn't really make sense, or it was confusing. It's like, yeah, I totally get what that person's
Mm-hmm.
saying. But you see, in social media, you get one viral clip and suddenly you think you're king shit. And it's like,
Yeah.
you're just one clip away
5 minute
from
of fame.
being yeah, exactly, like, you're right back to where you started, so I
Yeah.
would say, like, there's never been this instant feedback loop ever in,
Mm-mm.
like, human history, so
Mm-mm.
be prepared for that, where, yeah, you might get 2 clicks and
Yeah.
then 2,000,000, and
Yes.
you might get, like, "Oh, man, you go for it, Christopher, I'm so glad, I'm so proud of you," and then you might get, like you'll see, "Oh, I have 10 followers? What just happened here?"
Where did
Right?
you
Like,
where'd you go?
what
What did
where did
I say?
everyone go? I'm there by
What?
myself. Like, I
Yeah.
guess
Oh,
I'm
this
by
is it.
myself.
Is this it? Am I
Yeah,
being
this is it.
canceled? Ashton
It's
Kutcher?
over.
Am I being punked? Like, what's going on? Like, is this a joke? Is this real? Like, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. You
Yes.
scroll through your followers, you're like,
Yeah.
none of the friends you had are there
Yeah. You're like,
anymore. They blocked and
oops.
deleted you.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
like, no, I'm just gonna block you from seeing this. But yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
yeah, you have to just be, and to hold yourself accountable, and which is what you do,
Yes.
right? If you know, and that's
Yes.
what I'll always say, and I always lead the show being like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about where I'm at this moment in time with the knowledge
Hmm.
that I have. And if you have, my favorite was through the whole pandemic. I was like, if you think I'm wrong, send me information, and I'd sit there,
Yes.
crickets. I'm like,
That's right. Yeah.
you're not so cocky now in my DMs, but you're super
Yeah.
cocky where people can then jump on, like you said, and dogpile and like
Yeah.
make you feel like you're right. Like, okay, well, if you go to a meth head and you say, hey, is smoking meth a good idea? They're going to go, yeah. Does that mean that smoking meth is the right thing to do? I don't know. Not for me. That's not
Yeah.
my choice. Maybe that's your
Yeah.
choice. I don't know. No judgment. But
Yeah.
you know what I
No
mean? Like,
judgment. Yeah, exactly.
like
Yeah.
you can find people to validate your opinion, whether
Yeah.
it's a good thing or not, right? And I think that's like you
Yeah.
said, there's people that get very cocky, or like one thing I found in the freedom community, let's just say, is that they also took a huge advantage of people that were afraid and worried about what was going on. It
Mm,
was like, here's
right.
detox, how you do this. And they took advantage of the financial fear that was on that
Mm,
side. Like, break free. This is where I got real mad about MLMs. It's like, break free from the matrix and join
mm.
this. And it's like, counter argument, you're still a corporation, you still need the matrix to run the building, like, so
Yeah.
there's like a lot of like weird whatever. I'm not going into that pothole, but
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
there was just a lot of eye-opening things, a lot of like, okay, maybe not everybody is right, like this person got viral because of this one very popular
Yeah.
point, but maybe I don't align. Like recently, Laura the Mortician, I don't know if you know who she is,
Mhm.
on
Yeah,
TikTok,
yeah.
right? So I really loved her stuff, and then all of a sudden now, because I watch the drama channels, I'm like, she's involved in all this
Yeah.
drama, and I'm like, oh no. And then I just feel so torn because I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to judge her for just these handful of things because I still feel that she's entertaining. So it's like you constantly have to go through like holding people accountable for the shitty things that they do, at the same time not canceling for them maybe making mistakes, as long as they own up to it and say, you
Mhm.
know what, that joke didn't hit, maybe not joke. I'm going to
Mhm.
leave comedy out of that because I don't believe that there should be any holes on comedy. Like maybe
Yeah.
I misinformed this and I learned more, and now like her whole trauma with like the Chris car seat guy. Hey, I
Yeah.
didn't know. Now I know he was right. I apologize. Like, next time
Mhm.
maybe I'll stay in my lane. That was incorrect. But
Yeah.
instead it's like doubling down and being like, no, I had every right, and that's where it's like
Mhm.
that's where I think creators need to be held accountable for sometimes some of
Yeah.
the things that they do. And it's like you cannot know everything, but
No.
when you get called out and you can't have a proper discourse, I think that's where apologies should come in. And don't wear a white shirt and sit on the
Definitely.
floor and cry. Okay, James
Yeah.
Charles, like
Exactly, and, I mean, I received
sincere.
so much. Yeah, exactly, I received so much blowback for criticizing Joe Rogan, and I thought to
I
myself, it's like,
Good for you though. You were right on there. I back you on that one.
but thanks, but I feel like, we're getting into this, the reason, and I'm definitely gonna post this, but, like, I feel like a lot of the big podcasters now are turning into mainstream media, like,
110%.
right?
110%.
Like,
It's just turning into the news. Like, Ben
it's turning into
Shapiro,
the
please
news.
stop. Like, I get you
Oh
have to
my
have
gosh.
your like
Yeah.
advertisements, but like at least Brett Cooper does
Oh,
it really cute. She has a really great way of like
yeah, she's
leading it
oh,
in,
Brett
and it's like
Cooper.
one or two.
Yeah.
She's adorable. Love her so much.
Yeah, yeah,
And Ben, you have to do what you have to do, but to that point where it is
yeah.
starting to be, and if you don't agree with that, and that
Oh,
person, you're chastised. And it's like, listen, I love Joe Rogan for 90% of the shit he does, but
yes.
I'm also going to say I didn't love that, and that's fine. I don't have to. I don't expect him to
No.
produce everything that I fucking love, but at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm allowed to say that wasn't for me. Do I think he should be canceled? Do I think the episode should
No.
not air? No. I'm just
Yeah.
saying
Go for it.
I don't love this, and that's
Yeah.
allowed to be my opinion. If you want to be able to love it, I should be able to be like,
Mhm.
I don't love it. And like,
Exactly.
you shouldn't be that big of a fan of anybody to get that triggered
That's
about
right.
someone opposing them. Like at
That's
all.
100%, and it was just so wild. All these, like, people were like, and so I just noticed that years ago, Bill Maher was so critical of Obama, and then he finally gets
Yes.
the opportunity to sit down with Obama, and he's, like, so over the moon, and I'm
Passive.
like,
Yeah.
"What a fucking pussy." Like,
Baby. Yeah. Yeah.
say what you've been telling your audience for all
Yes.
these years. Don't be, like,
Don't sell out.
and look, exactly, don't sell out, and here's
Yeah.
the thing, I know I'm saying this as a podcaster, and I'm not making hundreds of millions of dollars, and I totally get that, but
I make
if
zero.
Obama were to, right, exactly, and if, like, Obama were to ever say, "Christopher, I wanna be on Open Minds," I'm like, "Okay,
Shitting my
I'm
pants.
I'm with it. I'm
Yeah.
shitting my pants, but by
Yeah.
the way, like,
We're having
there's
questions.
questions.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
have a real conversation here. It's
Yes.
gonna get pretty real pretty fast." Like,
Yes.
and so, and then I could totally get why his people would be like, "Yeah, no, great.
No
That's not,
say.
I'm not gonna have a fake conversation." And I feel like that's like when Joe Rogan sits down with Elon Musk, he's not talking to him about the fact that Tesla doesn't unionize its staff. It's the only
Yep.
car maker that doesn't. It's like, that to me is a conversation starter right
Yep.
there,
Yep.
and he doesn't talk about that. Or,
No.
cobalt mining for Tesla batteries. Like, why don't we talk about that? That's
Yeah.
pretty fucked, right? Like, why don't we talk
100%.
about what Tesla's doing for that? And so, and if you're not talking about that, then I don't want to hear you shoot the shit. And people will say, "Well, he's not this, like, investigative reporter." I'm like, I'm not expecting him to be,
But
but
I
he
would counter
he
that
has
though,
to.
because
Yeah,
he does though. He does bring on people of all walks
exactly.
of life, and he
Yes,
asks the hard fucking questions most of the
yes,
time. So when he doesn't,
exactly.
you have to sit back and go, why?
Why?
Why are you not
Exactly.
saying that?
Yes.
Like, why is it this
Right.
now what you're self-censoring and
Yeah.
avoiding? And I didn't know, I don't know if you've watched Working Moms at all on Netflix. It's based
Yeah.
out of okay, so it's based out of Toronto. If you're looking for a
Okay.
comedy, it's Canadian.
Yeah.
Ten
Nice.
ten recommend. It's fucking hilarious. Like, get through the first episodes. The first episodes are really awkward.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. You have to watch it because yeah,
Okay.
it's
I'm
so
gonna
good.
watch it. Yeah.
But
That's amazing.
yeah, it's just it's about like I don't know. It's not political, but it's good. It's Canadian. It's about working moms and like the faces that
Nice.
Canadians have. And she goes, one of them goes to Alberta and Cochrane, and like just it's just I
I
don't know
love
where I was
that.
looping that in. I keep doing this twice now that I've looped this around. Bring me back,
Uh-huh.
Christopher. Sort of
No,
went
we're talking
off
about
into
Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But just meaning like I feel like if you don't ask those good questions, you're being bought out. And what I was
Yes.
saying to it is that when she was doing interviews, because she is a PR person, and that there's a no
Mhm.
ask list. And I think that I would kind of
Mm.
struggle as a
Yep.
journalist to have a no ask list because it's like I'm gonna want to ask you pretty much all the fucking questions that are on the no ask list. And if you can't answer
100%.
those, I'm not sure that I want to have you a part of the show because my show is called
Yeah.
Being Real. So I
Yeah.
get it. There's some things that you're not ready to talk about, but if it's such a
Sure.
long list of things that are important, and that's why I'm having you on the show, like,
Yeah.
did the Rock and Joe ever talk about like Hawaii? Like, did they ever talk about like
Never.
so, but then
Yeah.
him and Oprah were so like all up in arms about it, and most
Yeah.
conspiracy talk was about them burning it down for land. Do you think that you would take this
Yeah.
moment to clear that air? And this is where the conspiracy world will take that and bring it in deeper because they're like, they didn't talk
Yeah.
about it. That means it's true, and they have something to hide, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. I'm not a part of those conversations, but you're
Yes.
not stopping those from getting deeper. And that's what makes me ask
Yeah.
why? Why?
And
Why?
exactly. And what's even more crazy is Joe Rogan talked about the Maui stuff and The Rock, like, hypothetically months ago. And I'm thinking, you've
Mhm.
got The Rock on. Here's your
Right in front of your
chance.
face.
And you
Nothing.
don't take it. So that tells me that, yeah, the Rock's people were like, don't talk about
Mm-mm.
Maui, don't talk about Oprah. And it's like, if I'm Joe Rogan, it's be like, well, you built your platform on honest conversation. That's how you got to this level.
Yeah.
And you have one of the biggest name in Hollywood. And you turn
And you
into
got
like,
nothing?
right, replace Joe Rogan with, CNN anchor.
Hmm.
And is it a different podcast? I don't
Yeah.
know.
I don't know.
Probably not.
No,
Right.
it's
Like,
yep, yep. And we want that controversy. That's what people go to Joe to ask. Like they
exactly.
want to hear them ask those questions. Not doesn't matter what anybody else is saying. I'm going to talk to you because
Yeah.
you are a part of this controversy. But now all of a sudden we're not
Correct.
talking about it. Why? And why have him on the show? Was that just like what
Yes.
was the point of that? I don't know. It
What
just
was the point?
yes, and
Yeah.
like you said,
It's
you
like,
start to see that as like they're turning into mainstream media. And I'll add to
yeah.
that of like influencers, let's say beauty influencers. You used to
Yes.
go to beauty that people used to go to beauty influencers because they were honest. They would go and say,
Yeah.
this makeup was great, this one was trash. Now you get
Mhm.
the like quote unquote, let's say hypothetically, allegedly, Michaela Nigueras of the world that are sponsored and they're not showing
Mhm.
it on anywhere, which they're starting to get in trouble with FTC. And it's like, this is
Mhm.
amazing. And because they're purchased, and then now the trust is
Mhm.
gone because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I thought you were just selling like promoting stuff you truly liked,
Yeah.
but you're just selling a product. And I feel like I'm with you with those big podcasters. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're selling out, like you love or hate Alex Jones, at least he's fucking authentic to who he is,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
he
Like
knows his brand and he's sticking
he
to
will
it.
not falter of who he is, right? And I
No.
I, I
No.
have a respect of that too. Same with Ben
Yeah.
Shapiro. I don't have to agree with
Yes.
him or Matt Walsh or anybody at the Daily Wire, but they are
No.
very at least solid in who they are, and I fucking respect that so
Yeah.
much because it's like
Yeah.
they're not some of them. Like I'd say some of them are pretty, but I feel like Ben is pretty like this is how I feel and respectfully. And it's not
Mhm.
well, lately he's been super hyper. I feel like a little bit of
Yeah.
different time, a different era over
Yeah.
there. But I just
Yeah.
I respect people. It's like you can have your belief and you can live in it and you can breathe that, but just be respectful that you're not the only opinion
Yeah.
and that other people have like Christmas. I didn't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
that there was a fight between Christmas, like a Christian or pagan holiday. I didn't know this was a big
Oh, right,
argument.
right.
And I was like, I started researching. I was like, this is weird. Like, oh my gosh, it's
Yeah.
like, how about like we just say that your reason isn't the only reason for the season, and everyone can have their own reason for their season. Just let them live and
Yeah.
open fucking presents, like
Right. Right. Yeah. Honestly,
it's
exactly.
like you don't realize how much controversy is in like
Yeah.
topics until you like break it apart and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, everyone's mad about everything all the time. No wonder why we're all medicated and stressed out. Like,
United States of Ativan. I remember reading that
yes,
article, right? Like so many
yeah.
people are on drugs. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like something that I'm like totally opposite. I'm like, please don't ever give me like Advil. Like I'm staying away
Yeah.
from that. And it's just really cool. Like I think through all of this, I've grown so much in
Yeah.
podcasting and my views of like the world, who I am, what's important
Amazing.
to me.
That's amazing.
Before we kind of like wrap up, I knew we were gonna have to get
Yeah.
as soon as we started talking, I'm like, this is gonna be analready. But
Yeah.
to kind of wrap up, so like we said, like you're at your 5 years, what are you most
Mhm.
looking forward to the future of your show? What would you like to see? And also, where can we find you to see your shows as well?
Yeah, so you can find me Instagram is probably where I'm most active, at Open Minds Podcast. Definitely check that out. I'm also on TikTok and trying to revive my YouTube account, successfully slash unsuccessfully. But what I envision, and it's all under Open Minds Podcast, so you can find me everywhere on socials for that. What I really want to do, over the next year and into the future, is hone the storytelling aspect and really get what I'm thinking through in as clear and uh, a way that evokes what people are thinking, but it's so blatant and obvious. And so to me, that's been my biggest struggle and something that I'm
Mhm.
going to continue working on. And then on top of that, not just getting big name guests,
Mhm.
the biggest, the highest numbered listen to podcasts where the researchers that have been excommunicated from academia because of their opinions. And I think that's a market, quote unquote, a niche that
Yeah.
people don't want to talk about. It's
Yeah.
like how many researchers have been ridiculed for, I know, and no one, uh, none of these researchers want their names out there, but
Of
there was
course.
a petition put forward to the government of Ontario for 500 healthcare professionals about
Mhm.
COVID-19, and
Mhm.
they went to the Toronto Star
Mhm.
to have their report published, and the Toronto Star said, no, we are not publishing this. 500 healthcare professionals saying these measures won't work. These
Mhm.
social distance measures make no difference.
Yeah.
And Toronto Star was like, no. And I thought how interesting that story would be to
Mhm.
tell, to say, by the way, there's healthcare professionals that think this is complete bullshit.
Totally.
Um, so to me, I need to lean into that and not be
Mhm.
so afraid.
Yeah.
So
We got your
that's
back
my
over
kind of
here.
plan. Thanks, man. So
we've
that's my
had
plan.
yeah, we've had nurses on, and we that were fired during the pandemic, and they were so afraid
Wow.
that we gave them aliases and there was no faces,
Mm,
because we just didn't want
wow.
them to get in trouble for the backlash and potentially lose their job. So I think that is a great place to be,
Wow.
because there's
Yeah.
there's beauty in advocacy, right? Like making
Hmm.
people feel strong in their story and in themselves, and they just need someone to be like, I got you. I got you. Go
Yeah.
and do it. I've got your back. Even one person is like, I believe in you, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's all
So
you
true.
need. And that's why I love
Yeah.
advocacy, because those people be like in my DMs all the time. Like I'm sure you've gone through moments where you're like, should I keep going?
Yeah.
Going through one of those last week, and I was like, should I just
Oh
tap it?
no.
Like
No,
2023,
keep it.
just be done with it. Like this
Yeah.
was fun. I promised myself 10 seasons. When I started, I said I always want 10 seasons, 5 years. That whatever that is, if it ends and it was just a fun chapter, it helped me through a time, it helped me grow. If it
Hmm.
grows to that, great. But 10 seasons. So we're end of 6 here. Um,
Nice.
but for me, I
Amazing.
just really
Congratulations.
thank you. What I love is that when I have a moment, I'm like, oh, am I doing this? Like, send me a sign. I wake up and it's someone saying, I want to share my story about breast implant illness on your show. Thank you so much for being an
Mm.
advocate, and letting me use your channel and your platform for my voice and my story. And it's like any moment of
Mhm.
doubt I have, someone will come in or be like, oh, I just listened to this episode and I thought about this and I never thought
Yeah.
about that. Thank you so much for like sparking that in me or making me feel
Yes.
valid. And my favoriteest part is when a guest comes on and they're vulnerable, and then we post it, and then
Yeah.
people message them saying, I had no idea you had depression. I had no idea you're struggling with
Yeah.
infertility. I had no idea. And thank you so much, because your
Mhm.
story has now, and you see that like ripple effect that goes out.
Mhm.
And that's what I want for the future of podcasts. That's why I don't want this Bill
Mhm.
C-18 to diminish any of us, because it
No.
all deserves space. I am not going to learn to be a better person without having these uncomfortable conversations, nor are you, nor everybody else.
Mhm. Right.
Let's be the
Right.
bridge. Let's lead by example and have these beautiful conversations and differences and come together. And I'm very excited to see where you go, where I go, or, and
Mhm.
like you said, it's not always about the big ones. It's about the big
No.
podcasts and the guests. It's about the impactful ones, the everyday
Mhm.
people, because not every people are like famous. And I wanted to just wrap that on one
Yeah.
point too. When it comes to people that go viral, have
Mhm.
understanding that, like Matt Rife, for example, he was in the trenches for what, 10 years until he got big.
Mhm.
Like, you have no
Right.
idea how long people have been doing something. And in that moment, they didn't
Mhm.
expect to go viral. And all of a sudden now we're supposed to look at these people as like they're everything because one fucking story caught that algorithm and it went
Yeah.
nuts. And it's not to say
Right.
that that point wasn't valid, but that doesn't mean that you are going to relate and that people are like, I'm so disappointed this person didn't line up
Yeah.
to everything. It's like you see one clip of 30 seconds of him being funnier. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like
So true.
you have to
Yeah.
be very careful when you're being out there and you're putting your comments out there to know that like people
Mhm.
could take it the wrong way. But
Yeah, oh, yeah.
you just get stronger, like you said. Like
You get
if
so
everything
stronger, yeah.
if everything was cherries, like one guy told me that I was fat and disappointing, and I was like, to some
Wow.
stranger on the internet, and I was like at the skinniest I'd ever been, ever, like unhealthily skinny, and I was like, and
Wow.
I'm disappointing. And at that point, I was just like, wow, anybody can just really say anything on social media and just get away with
Anything,
it.
yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
fine. That's fine. You just brush it off because at the end of the day, we know that we're doing the right things because
Yeah.
we're healing inside and we're getting those out there. And like you said, then you're not sitting in there with those demons in your head and like
No.
exploding on people in their DMs. You're able to go to your
Yeah.
podcast and let it all out. And people want to listen. They can come to you. If they don't. you know, I'm not in your
Exactly.
DMs yelling at you for your
Exactly.
opinion. I'm posting on my own
Yeah.
fucking show. Don't listen if you don't want to. But
Exactly. No, you're totally right.
this is so amazing. Is there anything else that you'd want to
Yes.
share? Do you feel like this will just be part one of many episodes that we'll probably be collaborating with in the
Yeah,
future?
I feel like I need to come out to Kelowna. Like
Yes,
this is amazing. Yeah, this is
yes.
so much fun.
I went to
Yeah.
Toronto. I've been to Toronto one time last year. My spouse is from St. Catharines, so we came
Oh,
and
perfect.
visited.
Okay.
Yeah, I see Niagara Falls for the first time because we
Oh,
weren't able to
nice.
fly, and so we were able to finally fly and come
Yeah.
out there. And I got to meet his family. Well, I'd met them; they've come
Nice.
here, but it was so nice. It's
Nice.
such a beautiful place. But I'm always like, please always come to Kelowna.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. We love going on like
Yeah.
we have a paddleboard rental company, so we like to take our friends out on the
Oh,
paddleboards and
oh my gosh.
the
That's
wineries and like
amazing.
we literally like
Oh,
it is Kelowna for sure. It is like a piece of
wow.
not politically because it is very blue,
Yeah.
like conservative area. It's not like,
Yeah.
but it is like all of those fun things. It's so beautiful here, and we love when
Yeah.
people come and we could do a real life podcast. I very rarely
Oh,
get to do real life ones. They're always like distance, which is great, but I had one and I'm
yeah.
like, I don't know what to do with you. Like, you're physically here. Like, where do I put my hands? What do I do? Like,
So
but
true. I know. In-person conversations.
yeah, but it's so beautiful
So
because I've
important.
just made so many beautiful connections and cheerleaders and like,
Yeah.
it's not competition. It's all like,
Yeah.
like go listen because we all have a piece of the puzzle. So I'm gonna shut
Yeah.
up
For
because it's
sure.
fucking 2 hours now. Oh, you guys,
Yeah. I can't believe
ah!
this. This is
So we'll have to do
amazing,
it
man.
again. So
Thank you.
maybe next time
Yes.
we'll come on with like a topic and we can, like you said, like having
Yes.
the conversation about like hormones and
Oh,
things in
I would love
Canada
that.
and like things in Canada, on both sides. What does that look like over there to you? What did it look like over here?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can revisit the last couple years, what that looks like. One of our
Yeah.
main guys on the show, he's a chiropractor from Vancouver that really got exonerated and is still struggling as a chiropractor. And like there's
Mm-hmm.
just so many
Mm-hmm.
cool people to connect and have stories and learn from. And just like every time I leave a
Yeah.
podcast, I like get this super high of like I just learned so much. Like
I'm
so
so glad. Yeah, this
yeah,
has been great. Then keep doing what you're doing, Brandy.
thank
Like
you.
even if like I just think that what you're doing in your voice is so important and so many more people benefit. And you're totally right. Like there are days where I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so crazy." And then someone will message you and be like, I was going through something and I saw your reel or like, I had the same opinion and I can't even talk to my partner about this and then I
Yeah,
saw your reel and you're like, holy crap, the wave of emotion that just hits you from people is sometimes
totally.
so hard and heavy and you
Mhm.
just it's hard and you can't even communicate that with friends because your friends don't get it,
No,
or if your family doesn't get it.
totally.
But like
Yeah.
someone tells you they're having a terrible day and they watched your reel or listened to your podcast and it's like I can't even imagine the impact that this would have if both of us didn't decided never to do this, like how
Absolutely.
much worse would our public discourse be?
Yeah, yeah. So I say we keep
Yeah.
going. I don't care,
Yeah.
Bill, whatever. You ain't coming after me. Like I'll find another way.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you ain't just shutting me up.
Exactly.
Like you
Yeah.
can give me strikes all you
Yeah.
want, you two, but I'm still here.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
like
coming back.
I'm
I'm
coming
creating another
back.
channel.
Yeah, like I'll just make
It's gonna be
another
called
one.
Closed Minds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What you all want to fucking be. I love it. You should do.
Yeah.
It's like you should almost when you have time. I know it's so hard because it's so much
Yeah.
work, but it's like you should almost do like Blair White has the Blair White and the it's like Blair Black or whatever. She has the two. You should almost
Oh,
have like a spin off of like almost like a satire of like
yeah.
the closed minds and like how people are
Yeah.
closed minded, right? Like as a joke and
Oh,
like.
I love
I'm
that.
sure that would
Yeah.
drive some like people to be mad and be like,
Oh,
no, here's the real thing, how I real feel on my open minds, but this is what closed minded people do. Ah, I see.
yeah.
See what happens when
Oh,
you
that
start
would be
talking?
cool. There we go. Yeah. I'm roping you in,
Chris,
Brandy. I'm roping
yeah.
you in.
All of a sudden goes to YouTube, makes a second channel.
It goes viral. I don't know,
Yeah.
no, Brandy. I
I
don't know
don't know.
you who you are.
I don't know. Like goes into my Riverside delete episode. I'm just kidding. But no, it's been
Oh,
so
this is
great
amazing.
because it's
Yeah.
been so fun. As our community, I know will absolutely love you. Go visit him, guys. Go check him out. I've binged the last couple days
Thank
just
you.
to make sure because I was like, you just never know. I want to make sure,
Yeah.
that we would have. And as soon as I was watching it, I was like, oh, he is totally open to open discourse. There's no judgment. There's no like
Yeah.
labels. It's just people conversing.
Just people.
That's what
Yeah.
people are doing on podcasts, guys. Don't get so upset about our opinions. We are just two
Yeah.
individuals in billions of
Yes.
people's of worlds, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't
Yep.
listen, don't want to if you do. But thank you guys for showing
100%.
up. Thank you so much, Christopher, for your time. Until next time, guys. Bye. Thank you guys for stopping by the show today. We appreciate you so much. If you like this episode and you want to hear more, make sure to show us some love on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest page, the Be Real Babe Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble channels, like those episodes, and turn on the notification bells. You can find our video version of the show on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify, or you can catch the audio version on Apple and Google Podcast. But stay tuned for more realness coming to you soon. Until next time, babes.